can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 3 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and it's all action today. We, of course, start with the very latest in this Israel-Hamas war, because numerous different angles coming up, like this one that we're going to be talking about right towards the top of the show. A former leader of Hamas has called for there to be an international day of Jihad tomorrow, which I am deeply concerned about, and I will be calling on our Met Police and the police right across Europe to be clamping down on that immediately. We cannot have those kind of issues playing out on the streets over here. The BBC's in hot water as well, though, aren't they? That's right, been reported to Ofcom over the language that they are using, or should I say refusing to use, when it comes to a designated terror group, Hamas. There appears to be a lot of debate at the moment as to whether or not the manner in which certain young people and babies were killed by Hamas in Israel. And I think that fundamentally misses the point, don't you? In other news, though, could rapists be spared jail? Yes, is this just the latest account of soft-touch Britain? Surely, surely, surely this has to stop now. We've got to come down on people. And finally, this one as well. Yes, bit of a scandal. Well, a bit of a scandal, quite a lot of a scandal potentially here as well. Some of the money that went to the Captain Tom Moore Fund, well, where did it go? I'll be revealing all very, very shortly. Patrick Christys, GB News. Yeah, busy hour coming your way. There's the potential as well, I should warn you, for us to be going and getting live shots from Paris. We're expecting some kind of pro-Hamas rally to take place in Paris, which I think we could all agree has probably got the potential to kick right off. So we'll be going to that, if indeed it does. GBviews at gbnews.com. Do you want our Met Police to clamp down, or any police force across the country, to clamp down hard at the potential for this International Day of Jihad tomorrow? GBviews at gbnews.com. But right now, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB Newsroom. The US Secretary of State has reassured the Israeli Prime Minister of Washington's support during a trip to the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu insists Hamas should be treated exactly as ISIS was. Antony Blinken says he knows the terrorist group doesn't represent the Palestinian people nor their legitimate aspirations. He told Netanyahu that as long as America exists, Israel will never have to defend itself on its own.
We must stand together, resolved to confront what is worst among humanity with what is best. We must provide an alternative to the vision of violence and fear, nihilism and terror presented by Hamas. That is what the United States will do, standing with Israel, working together with its people, and all those in this region who remain committed to the vision of a more peaceful, more integrated, a more secure, a more prosperous Middle East.
Antony Blinken says he's also trying to secure the release of hostages kidnapped by Hamas. More than 100 Israeli and foreign hostages have now been taken by the terrorist group into Gaza. Noam Sagi is a British Israeli whose mother's among the hostages. He's calling it a second Holocaust.
I'm here because I need to ask for help to release babies, kids, mothers and old people from their captivity. There's no politics here, no context, no religion, no race. Simple humanity. People who survived the Holocaust found themselves facing another one.
The government's organising flights for British nationals in Israel, with the first due to leave Tel Aviv today. The Foreign Secretary James Cleverly is urging British nationals who wish to get out to register their presence. Those eligible have been told not to go to airports unless instructed to do so. Meanwhile, in Gaza, vital medical supplies are running out, and the Red Cross says the situation is deteriorating fast. The only remaining power station stopped working yesterday. Fuel supplies are also dwindling and could run out within hours. Israel is preparing for a ground incursion into the Gaza Strip, though the military says no decision has been made yet. More than 1,300 Israelis have been killed since Saturday, including over 200 soldiers. Meanwhile, more than 1,400 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes. Israelis travelling in Europe at the time of the weekend's attack have been explaining to us why they chose to cut their travels short and come home.
It's very sad. We were on a holiday in the Netherlands, so it's very sad to hear all the news from Israel. But we don't have another country. Israel is our country. We are not afraid, and we are happy to go back. And if we will need to fight in order to give more hope and to achieve peace, so we will do it.
Friday is not the question, okay? That is my homeland. I'm going there because it's my homeland.
I prefer to be there, in the shelter with my people, with my family.
In other news, Bernie Ecclestone has been handed a 17-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty to fraud. The ex-Formula One boss will also have to pay £652 million to the tax authority. He appeared at London's Southwark Crown Court this morning after failing to declare more than £400 million of overseas assets to the government. The billionaire turns 93 later this month. He had been due to face trial in November after he'd previously denied the charge. And an MP for the Scottish National Party has defected to the Tories amid reports of a toxic and bullying culture in the party's Westminster group. Lisa Cameron's defection comes as she was facing a selection battle to be the candidate for a seat in the west of Scotland. She says she's a victim of group bullying at Westminster and has suffered panic attacks as a result. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he's delighted Miss she's joined the Scottish Conservatives. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back over to Patrick.
British and European authorities need to say no to jihad on our streets. We are not a fundamentalist Muslim continent. We never will be. Sharia law will never be for us. We do not have blasphemy laws, and we will not play host to foreign historic drama and conflict spilling onto our streets. I say this in light of the fact that there are calls now for an international day of jihad to take place tomorrow, Friday the 13th. It's quite appropriate, isn't it? The former Hamas leader has told Muslims to take to the streets. Well, Khaled Meshal led Hamas from 2004 to 2017. He now lives in Qatar, and he wants the Arab and Muslim world to rise up in light, of course, of what's going on in Israel and in Gaza. Well, the thing is, though, I just don't think this is going to end up being exclusively in the Arab world, is it? Today, for example, in a couple of hours' time, there is set to be a pro-Hamas rally in Paris, which we will take live, which obviously has the potential to turn very ugly very quickly. We've seen incidents in America, in Australia, in Sheffield, in London, in Berlin. Now, it's not going to take much, I don't think, for the elements of the Muslim anti-Israeli diaspora across Europe to see some form of day of jihad taking place in the Middle East and then respond to their brothers and sisters by taking to the streets themselves. Look, we can't have that here, can we? That would be openly supporting a terror group in the shape of Hamas. It would be openly supporting terrorist activity. You know, Jews on the streets of Britain and Europe will basically just have to stay inside, will they? I mean, Brits will just have to suck it up and allow more incidents of people marching through the streets supporting a terror group. I mean, no, come on. Britain and Europe has to decide right now how it's going to deal with the potential uprising, because in the coming days, the situation in Israel and Gaza is almost definitely going to step up a notch or two. And Britain and Europe stands with Israel. Yet within each European nation, there are clearly pockets of support for Hamas, for the destruction of the Jewish race and for the eradication of Israel. Now, there is a very important, in fact, an absolutely vital distinction to be made between people who simply want those in Gaza, Palestinians, to have a better life, and those who cross that boundary towards supporting a terrorist organisation. And I absolutely do not want to tar everybody with the same brush. I would never want to do that. But right now, we have a former leader of a prescribed terrorist organisation calling for an anti-Israeli Muslim uprising, and we need to make it very clear, I think, that if you take part in that in Britain, then you get locked up. We have had to deal with a heck of a lot of incidents that have frustrated certain more fundamentalist elements of the Muslim community, such as the Batley Grammar School protests, for example. Our police force needs to crack down immediately if it appears that people in this country are going to answer a call by a former leader of a terrorist organisation that has just murdered Jewish babies and children. Any support for those radicals needs to be dealt with straight away. Yeah, those are my views. I want to hear from you, gbviews@gbnews.com. Again, I want to make the important distinction, the vital distinction between people who want the people of Gaza and the Palestinian people just to have a better life and think that there are issues there, and people who actively support Hamas and actively support the actions that we've seen in Israel. There is a distinction there, and we don't want to kind of blur all of those lines. But the UK government is arranging flights out of Israel now for British nationals. The first flight is due to depart from Tel Aviv later today. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been in Israel, asserting his country's support for Israel. He's told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, "We're not going anywhere," as the pair met in Tel Aviv. Yes, well, let's now cross over to Tel Aviv and get the very latest with GB News reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you very much. What's it like where you are now?
Well, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State for the US, has actually just left this location here. We're at the Tel Aviv Expo Convention Center, which for the last 4 days, since the start of the war, has really just evolved very suddenly into a volunteer effort. Thousands of people coming here every day, gathering supplies and also hunting for missing persons, which has been a grave issue across the country since the war erupted. Mr. Blinken was toured around the facility just behind me by members of staff here, organisers, but it's a very fluid situation here. It's a grassroots foundation here. People have just come together organically to support Israel. And the Secretary of State has come here just moments after his speech, his conference, his press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, in the last couple of hours. Both of those leaders called for moral clarity in this situation. Netanyahu described the actions of Hamas terrorists in Israel as ISIS-like. And earlier in the week, we heard Israelis describing the ISIS-like butchery of the Hamas terrorists and their actions in the kibbutz and some of the massacres carried out in southern Israel. For his part, Mr. Blinken said that there was a false equivalence being delivered between the actions of the Israeli state in Gaza and the actions of Hamas terrorists in the region. That's the situation in detail in Tel Aviv, but more broadly across the country, the fighting, of course, rages on. Some this morning thought today would be the calm before the storm, as that likely ground incursion into the Gaza Strip draws on and more troops mass down there. But as we've seen, actually, fighting has continued. Rocket barrages have come in from Gaza. We heard explosions in the last hour as rockets were intercepted over Ashdod by the Iron Dome defense system. And the war has pushed further into Syria as the Israeli Air Force has struck the Aleppo and Damascus international airports, neutralizing their runways. So a very fluid, very complex battle space here, and fighting continuing on all fronts.
Yeah, absolutely. It does appear as well as more and more countries being drawn into it in a more direct way. You've mentioned Syria there. There were rumblings of action around the Lebanon area last night. Of course, Gaza is as involved as it could possibly be, and one just wonders whether or not that is going to escalate. Again, I want to emphasise that the former leader of Hamas has called for some kind of international day of Jihad and called for people in Jordan and in Egypt and that kind of group of people around there to rise up and to start making their voices heard. And I think that has massive connotations, frankly, as well, given what we've already seen on the streets of Britain and on the streets of Europe. But, Charlie, we'll go back to you very shortly. Thank you very much for everything that you're doing for us over there. It's Charlie Peters, who is in Tel Aviv. But soldiers have been gathering along the Israel-Lebanon border, as we've been hearing. Now, the BBC have been reported to Ofcom over the refusal of the broadcaster to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. So we've got the situation in detail on the ground now, so we can kind of pick apart some of the different angles of this. Our state broadcaster, as it were, is refusing to call a designated terrorist group who have unequivocally gone and committed atrocities. And can I just take this opportunity as well to say, in my view, if you are trying to split hairs, really, over whether or not young people, babies, suffered their heads being cut off, or whether or not they were shot to death, I think you're missing the point there. That would be my view. But 5 lawyers wrote to the regulator and accused the broadcaster of failing to show impartiality beyond doubt, urging Ofcom to investigate the BBC. But what's next for the BBC? Have they fallen well below its standards expressed in its editorial values? Why are they so reluctant to call a terror group a terror group? Let's get more on this now with ex-BBC journalist Danny Kelly. Danny, thank you very much. What on earth is going on in New Broadcasting House?
I think the BBC have got it terribly wrong, Patrick, and this denial that they ever used the word terror attack or terrorist, that's just demonstrably untrue. Only on the 23rd of September, there was a BBC article commemorating the tragedy on 9/11, and they labelled it as a terror attack. So when the World Affairs editor, John Simpson, says the BBC never used the word terror attacks or indeed terrorists, that's just demonstrably untrue.
He's used it. Sorry, Tony, but he's used it. People have gone through his tweets. I mean, there's always the receipts, Danny. There is always the receipts, as you well know, and he's used the word terrorist. So he's not been shy in the past.
Sure. And as a journalist and as a radio presenter, when we had the 7/7 terror attack, I called it a terror attack and I used the word terrorist, and no one told me not to use the word terror attack or indeed terrorist. And once we establish what Mr. Simpson's saying is not actually true, you then need to sort of delve a little bit more deeply, Patrick, and ask the question, why are they reluctant to use the word terror attack or terrorist? So if they're OK labelling Al-Qaeda terrorists and terror attacks, why aren't they OK labelling Hamas as the terror attacks or indeed terrorists? And then you have to ask yourself, well, maybe it's because they sort of get why Hamas exists. They understand and recognise why Hamas exists. Now, they would find it deplorable themselves on a human level what happened in Israel, but they sort of will get why Hamas exists. And that, unfortunately, is my view. I think they're very liberal, left-leaning, and I would suggest that they're pro-Palestinian. Now, that's a valid opinion to have. Because lots of people hold this opinion. But unfortunately, it's the BBC. And I think they're being found out, really, for what they are on a managerial basis.
I think they have managed to fall into the trap, genuinely, of conflating every single Palestinian, or whether or not you think that Israel always treats the people of Gaza with as much respect and dignity as they possibly could, and actually maybe being too supportive of Hamas, which is, of course, a terrorist organisation. I'm just going to read a little bit from this letter. So 5 Jewish eminent legal minds have decided to go to task here on the BBC. It's quite... I mean, the wording of this is sharp, which I do like. On the 7th of October 2023, Hamas launched a large invasion of the State of Israel, which resulted variously in the slaughter, rape and abduction of over 1,000 Israeli citizens. So it's a strong start, this letter. There is nothing controversial about that. It is a fact. The BBC has fallen well below its standards expressed in its editorial values in its reporting of that invasion and the consequences therefrom. It then goes on to quote aspects of its editorial charter. You think that there is the potential now for the BBC to, what, be overtly pro-Hamas?
This is remarkable, isn't it? Again, going back to John Simpson's letter, he says that the BBC are looking at things objectively. I think it's the opposite. I think objectivity would be to call them out as being a terror group. They're prescribed as being a terror group. So that's the objectivity. All you're doing is literally reading out the truth. So then you have to look at it subjectively. Why are they so reluctant? And I take you back to my earlier view. I think that management are more pro-Palestine than they are pro-Israel, and they sort of get... They don't want things like this to happen, but they sort of understand why Hamas exists, and I think that's seeping through with their broadcasting.
I think, actually, what has come out so far, anyway, from what is this just unbelievably desperate situation that's taking place, and quite possibly only going to get worse, actually, it's been quite good at sorting out who's who in everything. It's been quite a good way of scrolling through your Twitter feed and realising, actually, who's got their heads screwed on and who actually has some unbelievably fruity views. And, again, Danny, I've been amazed by the amount of people quibbling over whether or not the exact nature in which children have been killed in a kibbutz in Israel. And that's just really opened my eyes to how many people clearly... I mean, they're not asking for this. They're not asking for this kind of demonstrable level of proof for any kind of other attack. But when it's against Jews, for some reason, we need to see the pictures. It's weird.
Yeah, I was listening to your interview with the former BBC and the former Channel 4 head of policy yesterday, and curiously, and it was most enlightening, but his answer to one of your questions was, look, I can see it from both sides. We're not talking about... At the moment, we're not talking about why Hamas exists. We're talking about the atrocities that the terror organisation Hamas perpetuated on Israeli soil. So that fella couldn't remove himself from actually reminding you about why Hamas exists. And that was illustrative of the BBC and their managerial, very pro-Palestine policy, to even live on GB News to say, well, you see it from both sides, don't you? And that's the problem.
Look, Danny, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. It's Danny Kelly there, of course, who is a former BBC journalist and is now a fan favourite on GB News. There you go. But look, loads more on this story on our website. You can go to gbnews.com. It's the fastest-growing national news site in the country. It's got the best analysis, big opinion and the latest breaking news, which we are hoping to bring you quite shortly. As, again, can I remind you, are expecting a pro-Hamas rally to take place in Paris, which we should be able to bring you live. But you are watching and listening to GB News. Coming up very shortly, convicted criminals could be spared jail because our prisons are full. And, of course, we will be bringing you all the very latest from the Middle East. Patrick Christys, GB News. This is Britain's News Channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's News Channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show, that's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
There have been reports that rapists could avoid prison from next week due to changes to sentencing guidelines as a result of soaring prison populations. Now, this comes as the government has sought to clear the court backlogs, but GB News understands that suspected offenders will be kept out on bail from Monday, but it will only be criminals not deemed to be a risk to the public. But I suppose who makes those decisions? You know, joining us now is GB News' political editor, is Christopher Hope. I mean, this sounds frankly terrifying to anybody who doesn't want to be wandering the streets with rapists and violent offenders. But I think it's everyone.
Well, where they are denying that people who are dangerous to the public will be allowed in the streets. What they are saying, and they're admitting, the prisons are full in England and Wales. Big problem with capacity, goes back decades, this problem. They are saying that from Monday, if you're sentenced for, if you're a criminal but sentenced but not for a serious crime, not a risk to other people, to the public, you may not go to jail, you'll be left out on bail. If you skip bail, then you can get a longer term in prison. But the point is they're trying to take the heat off the jail cells.
Well, we just need, I don't know, build more prisons. Is anyone suggesting this?
Yes, they are. It's hard because people don't like it near their homes. It's hard to get through planning. There were plans for super prisons under Jack Straw when he was Justice Secretary back in 2006-07. They fell foul of austerity in 2010. Since then, very few new prisons have been built. Wandsworth Jail, of course, overcrowded. Some guy escaped from that a few weeks ago. Yes. That caused a massive row. Big issues there. So I think there's an issue with the capacity, but rapists will be. Well, a denial here from the MOJ, the Justice Department. They're saying they are categorical. The most serious offenders will be sent to prison and won't be allowed to run around the streets.
I used to live at the back of Style Prison, which is I think I'm right in saying it's Cheshire, the largest women's prison. And I used to quite enjoy it when the siren went off. It used to inject a little bit of excitement in the day, you know. Was it this idea
was the siren for escape?
Just by living near a prison that you somehow in any way your life is negatively impacted, I fundamentally disagree with. As long as the prison walls are high enough and the electric fences work.
But why was it sounding an escaped prisoner?
Well, I like to think it was a drill. Yeah, I like to think it was a drill. My dad used to tell me it was a drill as he was kind of bundling me into the garage and into the basement.
Into a safe room.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I mean, the wider concern here for the vast majority of the British public is that we can have people who are committing serious offences, whether or not it's offences as serious as rape or murder, whatever, who could go to court and singularly, because we just don't have enough places in prison, could walk out. And
For me, it's further evidence of how so much is going on, so many big things are happening in the world, and that's absorbing a lot of time of our politicians. There are some basics around the country which aren't being done, such as building more prisons, finding enough capacity to lock up convicted criminals, and that's a problem.
It is a massive problem. It is a massive problem for us going forward. Christopher, thank you very, very much for all the latest on that. I am just being told now that we are going to take pictures of Gaza live, so we can go over there now, which is... we can see clearly that there is some form of explosion has just taken place, and that is the Gaza skyline, which is diminishing by the day, it must be said. We were kind of expecting maybe a ground incursion by Israeli forces to have taken place. Now, the siege is continuing. The latest from Israel is that they're saying that there will be no food, fuel, supplies, etc. into Gaza until hostages are released. I wonder whether or not they are just trying to give as much time as possible to get the hostages back before they go in, quite possibly because they know that maybe once they do go in, there is a diminishing possibility of getting those hostages back. It is also worth noting that a former Hamas leader has urged Muslims to, quote, take to the street in protest against Israel in what's been described as a day of jihad. This, of course, will be very, very concerning for everybody. But, Christopher, you are still with me now. Christopher Hope, our political editor. Britain, I mean, unwavering when it comes to our support. James Cleverly was there yesterday, had to run for a bit of shelter, didn't he? The political reaction remains incredibly strong, doesn't it?
That's right, we are taking a lead on this. Of course, he's going ahead of Anthony Blinken going out there, the most senior US diplomat. First flights leaving today from Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv with any British nationals who want to come. It's sensitive. Sources, very senior sources tell me in the Foreign Office that a lot of UK nationals in Israel don't want to be seen to be leaving.
Yes.
They want to defend the homeland. They want, and we are seeing, of course, 100 or so British nationals going out there to do that thing. So it's not as straightforward as you might think, going to safety. They want also, like with Ukraine, you know, people want to defend their homeland from a threat, and you can totally understand that. So it's a complicated story.
Yeah, no, it is indeed. Christopher, thank you very much. Christopher Hope there, GBNews' political editor. You are looking at live footage there from Gaza, where a bombardment continues. We'll bring you up to date with the rest of it. We're going to be talking, of course, as well about the BBC being reported to Ofcom over their lack of language when it comes to Hamas. We're also going to be keeping you up to date on a situation which we are expecting to get going, kick off in France at some point very soon when it comes to a pro-Hamas protest on the streets of France. But before all of this, it's time to get your latest news with Rhiannon.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3:30. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The US Secretary of State has reassured the Israeli Prime Minister of Washington's support during a trip to the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu insists Hamas should be treated exactly as ISIS was. Antony Blinken says he knows the terrorist group doesn't represent the Palestinian people nor their legitimate aspirations. He told Netanyahu that as long as America exists, Israel will never have to defend itself on its own. Bernie Ecclestone has been handed a 17-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty to fraud. The ex-Formula One boss will also have to pay £652 million to the tax authority. It's after failing to declare more than £400 million of overseas assets to the government. And an MP for the Scottish National Party has defected to the Tories amid reports of a toxic and bullying culture in the party's Westminster group. Lisa Cameron's defection comes as she was facing a selection battle to be the candidate for a seat in the west of Scotland. She says she's a victim of group bullying at Westminster and has suffered panic attacks as a result. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2244 and €1.1598. The price of gold is £1,532.14 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,641 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
OK, so you're looking at live shots there of Gaza as the bombardment continues. Of course, we are awaiting the potential for a ground incursion by Israeli troops. They are massing on that border. There were reports last night which have since been diminished somewhat of a bombardment taking place from Lebanon into Israel. Clearly, the situation there not quieting down any time soon. And it must also be said that the reports of some of the horrors that have taken place in that initial storming, the so-called flood from Gaza into Israel, are absolutely, appalling. And Israel's official Twitter account has decided to take the unprecedented step of tweeting some very graphic images to dispel the potential rumours that maybe there were lies about the exact nature of some of the Hamas terrorist actions. For reasons that I hope are obvious to everybody watching and listening at home, will not go into the exact nature of what has been tweeted now, because it's far too graphic, but I'm sure that you can all get what I'm alluding to. Former Hamas leader, though, has urged Muslims to, quote, take to the street in protest against Israel. So former Hamas chief Khaled Mashal has called for protests to take place across the Muslim world this Friday in support of Palestinians. Let's have a listen, shall we?
I call on you, me being included as well, and we are all responsible for this, to start with the things that we are used to, but with a higher ceiling, first of all for anger, to head to the squares and streets of the Arab and Islamic world on Friday, the Friday of Al-Aqsa flood. Deliver a message, through the squares and the streets, a message of anger, that we are with Palestine, that we are with Gaza, with Al-Aqsa, with Jerusalem, and that we are part of this battle. This is first.
Yes, obviously not his real voice there, it must be said. But Mashal also praised those who took part on the attack in Israel. So joining me now is Imam and Director of the Oxford Islamic Information Centre. It's Dr. Sheikh Ramzi. Thank you very much for joining me. Are you afraid or concerned at the potential for demonstrations to erupt in Europe as well? We're expecting some in France today.
Of course, main thing is, before I start off anything, I would like to say I love the people going follow the Old Testament, New Testament, and the Quran. That's what I was going to say. I love all the people, peace. However, what we need to do, it is they are asking, they don't know. The problem is at the moment here, they do not know what the Netanyahu would do to these Gazan people, 2.5 million people. They are very worried, especially the worried which they, at the moment today was Syria attacked by the Israel. They are worried when he talks, for example, we want to defend ourselves and attacking. We are worried when he says, I want to change the whole the Middle East. What they want to do, that's what they worried, and the people panicking. And he says, help, help, help. And of course, he will come, this person, when she come, of course, one of the leaders, he will say, and you will see, many people would like to. They have a right in the United Kingdom, for example, to do protest and to show.
But do they have a right to support a terrorist organisation, which Hamas is?
No one has a right to support any terrorist organisation. Right. It be a Hamas, Palestine, Israel, or no one should support any terrorist organization, right. Even in Russia. Nobody should support at all. We are brothers and sisters in humanity. and we would like
yeah,
to
that's fine, isn't it? But apart from the fact that in reality, unfortunately, that's not how it is it? I mean, we're looking at scenes there on the streets of London. We've had scenes in Sheffield. We've had scenes, you know, all over Europe. We've had scenes in Australia. We've had scenes in America of people who I think would quite clearly like to see Israel, and dare I say it, possibly the Jewish race, wiped off the face of the earth. How do we deal with that? How should we deal with that?
This is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. Anyone think about the Jewish can go out of the earth. It is act of God which Jewish people, Muslim, Christian, stay to the end of the world. There is no doubt about it. It is in the Holy Quran. But how would I like to say everybody should love each other when the hatred take over, we kill each other. But if the hatred goes away, we will find we are brothers and sisters of each other. We will find we are member of the one family.
Would you urge British Muslims to not take part in any demonstrations tomorrow then, do you think? Because I know that there are huge elements. Just let me finish because there are a load of members of the Jewish community who are absolutely terrified at the idea of going out of their house, right? So do you think that maybe tomorrow British Muslims should not demonstrate?
I would go. Of course, it is entirely up to the British Muslim to do it. They have leaders to do it. And if, for example, I see myself any atrocity from anywhere, I would like to see the United Nations get involved, and two-state solution is a solution. You cannot go every 10 years a fight and a war. They have ideology. They have, for example, the Gaza have a right to exist, not just stopping the water from the little children. You're stopping the water and food from the little children. Mostly they are young. The half of the Gaza people are young. That means 1.5 million are young people. You are starving them for what? Is that a revenge or is that a justice?
Can I just say that maybe some of the situation that's taking place with the current blockade of Gaza is maybe because a load of Hamas terrorists flooded into Israel and slaughtered and raped innocent people?
Yes.
So is that not justified then?
But the main thing is I would somehow, with all respect, I do not, again, I condemn any act of terrorism, but I do not think any Muslim go under rape if they have a right, go under rape. However, maybe happen, I don't know. What I would like to say here, the people has a right, for example, if the Netanyahu is a war of Netanyahu, not war of Israel. Netanyahu wants to say an attack and get the Levant. Levant is 4 countries. He says, I want to change the Middle East. That means they're going to get Syria. They're going to get Lebanon. They're going to get Jordan. They're going to get Palestine. He's doing that, and you will see. He says, when I want to change it, everybody get worried. At the moment, again, I said, they attacked Syria. It was in the Sky News. They attacked Syria. This is wrong. We need the United Nations. We need the United Kingdom. We need the America intervene and stop it. Not just say I want to do and I want. Of course, we are human. They put the hatred away. We love you all. We are all Muslim Jews in UK. Muslim Jews, Christian. They go to it. They go and pray in the Jewish. Muslim go in the when they got the no mosque, go and pray in the Jewish place, synagogue. We are so close. Why we are close? We are not there. Therefore,
why just out of interest, why do synagogues and schools, Jewish schools in Britain, always have security outside them?
If I tell you one thing, of course, I was in the United Nations and I was in many times in the United Nations, and several of the big organizations came there with the guard, and when I cuddled them, he said, no, he's a good Muslim. No, we haven't got. They may be. God bless them. God bless them.
No, but why? What is it they're afraid of? Come on. What is it?
Nothing. If it was up to me, I love them all, Christian, Muslim, Jews, Hindus. Let's work together. We are in United Kingdom. You don't really need. Have you seen any attacks? We have seen an attack in a Muslim mosque more than a synagogue. You can see that the moment Islamophobia. Therefore, we maybe don't need, maybe they exaggerate, but I say, if I love you, you should love me, not hate me. This is important. A United Nations has to get involved. Two-state solution, bless all the Jews, bless all the Christians, bless all the Muslims.
All right. Interesting stuff. Look, thank you very much for coming on. I must say, look, I appreciate you coming on. Anyway, thank you. Dr. Sheikh Ramsey there, who is the director... He's an imam, of course. OK. And the director of the Oxford Islamic Information Centre. There you go. That was some views there. So, you are with GB News with me, Patrick Christys, bringing you all the very latest until 6 p.m. Up next, perhaps one of the most bizarre defections a Westminster election has ever seen. So, an SNP MP, which is very difficult to say, has defected to the Conservatives. Yes, that's true. I'm not making this up. Why on earth has she done that? Well, we'll find out in just a moment. Patrick Christys, GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties. You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. You're with GB News with me, Patrick Christys, bringing you all the very latest until 6 p.m. Now, yes, we are going to talk about one of the most bizarre situations when it comes to a defection, a political defection, certainly one of the weirdest ones that I can think of anyway. A member of Parliament for East Kilbride, Strathaven and Leishmagau, Lisa, which I should have practised, obviously, before coming on air, Lisa Cameron has quit the Scottish National Party and defected to the Conservatives. So she said that she quit because of the toxic culture in the party in Westminster and said that she had received support from Mr Sunak after her mental well-being deteriorated in recent weeks, but had no contact from the SNP leadership. The Prime Minister welcomed her to the party, calling her a brave and committed constituency MP. With us now is Catherine Forster, our political correspondent. What's happened?
It's quite astonishing, isn't it, Patrick? Yesterday, Lisa Cameron was the Scottish National Party MP for East Kilbride. Today, she's still the MP for East Kilbride, but she's now a Conservative MP, just like that. And of course, the clue's in the name. It's not just the Conservative Party, it's the Conservatives and Unionist Party. They're all about keeping the union together, whereas the SNP are all about breaking it up. So quite astonishing. Now, it's fair to say she was going to be facing a battle for selection for the next election today. It's likely she wasn't going to be selected, and she's now decided that she's not going to stand as the Conservative candidate next year. So Rishi Sunak's delighted, saying, oh, this proves that we're on the right track, that she wants to come to a party that's making long-term decisions for a brighter future, shoehorning in that message. But she's not going to benefit them for very long. Now, the specific reason she's given is that she's basically saying there was a toxic and bullying culture in Westminster. She stood up for somebody who'd been abused by Patrick Grady. He was found to have behaved inappropriately towards a staff member, and he was briefly suspended and he had to apologise. She thought that the party did not support the victim properly. She also had real concerns about the proposed SNP gender reforms. Hamza Yousaf saying it's the least surprising news ever, but not a great look for him. And the SNP conference kicks off in Aberdeen on Sunday.
Well, there we go. Yes, like I said, quite an unusual defection. Oh, expertly summarised, Catherine. Thank you very much. Catherine Forster, our political correspondent in Westminster for us, which just proves to be another day of drama, doesn't it? OK, now, this story's been brewing for a little while, but we can bring you the very latest for it. It is about Captain Sir Tom Moore, specifically the fact that his daughter has admitted keeping £800,000 from the 3 books he wrote before he died, despite the prologue of one of them saying that the money would go to the charity in his name. So Hannah Ingram Moore has publicly said how her father had wanted the family to keep the profits from the book in Club Nook Limited, which is a firm separate to the Captain Tom Foundation charity. So quite a lot going on here. I'm just going to give you a little bit more detail on all of this, really. So there's been a controversy raging for quite some time. So the daughter of Captain Sir Tom Moore has now admitted to keeping £800,000, apparently, from those books that he wrote. He, of course, I was going to say became famous. I'm not sure if that's really the right word for this absolute hero, is it? But raised a load of money for charity, anyway, for the NHS specifically, at the height of the coronavirus crisis, by, as you will be able to see if you're watching us on TV now, walking up and down his back garden on that kind of walking aid constantly. So Hannah Ingram Moore, who is his daughter, said the family kept the sum from 3 books because Captain Tom did want them to keep the profit. But the Captain Tom Foundation has actually been under investigation by the Charity Commission for more than a year in relation to potential conflicts of interest between the charity and businesses owned by Ingram Moore and her husband Colin, as well as concerns over mismanagement and compliance with the charity law. So there we go. She's quoted as saying, "These were my father's books, and it was honestly such a joy for him to write them. But they were his books. He had an agent, and they worked on that deal, and his wishes were that the money would sit in Club Nook," which is, of course, one of their companies, specifically for them. Well, there we go. Yeah, I'm not sure how well this will be received, by the way. More information to follow. But, of course, he was 99 years old when he sadly died in 2021. He planned to raise £1,000 initially by walking around his garden 100 times. I mean, it absolutely snowballed. And in the end, he raised 38 million quid for the NHS. and received a knighthood from the Queen. So there we are. But alas, you know, whether or not all of the money has gone to the right place, we will have to wait and see. But I can now take you to Gaza, because these are live shots from Gaza. Yes, indeed, smoke is continuing to billow from there. For what it's worth, within the last hour, the Israelis have again confirmed and unfortunately felt the need to verify with pictures some of the atrocities that have been committed by Hamas terrorists against a very young Israeli individuals there. It absolutely makes people feel sick to their stomach, doesn't it, when you see this kind of stuff? I just want to emphasise again the kind of thing that I've got coming up for you in the next hour, because I will have the latest from Israel. I will also speak with one of the lawyers who wrote to Ofcom complaining that the BBC's position on Hamas didn't go far enough. So, in the next hour, I will be speaking to one of these, eminent legal minds who has written to Ofcom complaining that the BBC's position on Hamas is basically wrong, completely wrong, goes against the BBC's editorial guidelines, that they are not calling them terrorists. So I think that is going to be an absolutely fascinating interview. I'm also going to be talking, in other news, about the fact that apparently 2 million motorists every single day could be getting incorrectly fined by dodgy ULEZ cameras. So, stick around to find out exactly whether or not that could apply to you. And a man has won Woman of the Year. Why does this stuff keep happening? How difficult is it to just find a woman, right, a real-life woman, a biological woman, and give her these awards? Why does this kind of thing keep happening? Yes, it's everybody's favourite delusional individual is Dylan Mulvaney, who, of course, is responsible in no small part for the absolute tanking of shares in Bud Light. They are now Attitude Magazine's Woman of the Year, apparently, and were named as such at an awards ceremony last night. I'll just say it again. How difficult is it, really, to give that award to an actual woman? But get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.com. And don't go anywhere. There's absolutely loads coming your way. And yes, just a little heads up as well. We are expecting some incidents to take place in France, because there is supposed to be a pro-Hamas rally in France taking place. You know what I'm looking forward to seeing? How the French police handle it, because I think they maybe will give a lesson to the police over here in Britain. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Alex Berkell. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, when we have some pretty wet and windy weather waiting to push its way into southern parts as we go through the next 12 hours or so. That's in association with an area of low pressure just to the southwest of the UK that's currently tracking towards us. What it means is, as we go through the end of Thursday, yes, it's a cloudy picture, but it's going to turn increasingly wet and windy as we go through tonight and into the early hours of Friday morning. Slightly drier further north across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland and into Scotland, but even here we are expecting some blustery, showery weather to push its way southwards. Could turn a little chilly for some sheltered spots of Scotland. Otherwise, under the cloud and rain, it's going to be fairly mild. So Friday then, a wet picture across many parts of England and Wales. Watch out for some high totals of rain, could cause some disruptions, some localised flooding, and even some heavy thundery, showery rain could affect more southern counties. Blustery showers affecting parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too, but a greater chance of seeing some bright and sunny spells here. Coldest though towards the north. In the south, could be a little bit muggy at times with highs of around 21, possibly 22 Celsius. By Saturday, it is going to be markedly colder. Arctic air plunging its way down from the north, and in that northerly wind, likely to see quite a few showers around. These could turn wintry over the Scottish high ground, but by Sunday and into Monday, I'm expecting it to be largely dry for all of us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and Israel is continuing to fight back. Yes, bombs are raining down, missiles are raining down on Gaza. We'll bring that to you. I'll tell you what else we're going to bring to you, hopefully this hour anyway, is the latest from Paris, because we are expecting a Hamas-inspired demonstration to take place in Paris. The thing that I'm going to be looking out most for is how the French police handle it, because tomorrow, well, there's calls for an international day of jihad around the Muslim world. I can't help but feel as though that might spread out onto the streets of Britain. What will that mean? How will our police handle it? Will they be able to learn a thing or two from whatever happens in Paris? Yes, but on a similar-ish note, the BBC has been reported to Ofcom over their refusal to label Hamas as a terrorist organisation. I will be speaking to one of the lawyers who has reported the BBC to Ofcom, and in the last few moments, Ofcom have released a statement, which again, I will bring to you very, very shortly. I'll also be discussing this as well. Yes, that's right. Wrong, plain wrong. Apparently, 2 million motorists every single day could be wrongly getting zapped with ULEZ cameras. Apparently, the cameras might be a bit dodgy. So, yeah, find out if that applies to you. And something a bit different to finish off the hour. Apparently, there is an invasion of Chinese mitten crabs, and they are taking place all over the UK, around coastal and river areas. Dog walkers especially are being told to watch out. Apparently, we are being invaded by Chinese mitten crabs. So there we go. Patrick Christys, GB News. Yes, and to think we were worried about Taiwan. But gbviews at gbnews.com is indeed that email inbox. I'm going to be with you right after we hear your latest headlines from Polly.
Patrick, thank you. Well, good evening to you. The Palestinian president is our top line this morning, this afternoon. He's condemned the violence against civilians in the war between Israel and Hamas. Mahmoud Abbas said the killing or abuse of civilians contravenes morals, religion and international law. His comments come as vital medical supplies run dangerously low in Gaza, with Red Cross officials warning the situation is deteriorating fast. The only remaining power stations stopped working yesterday. Fuel supplies are dwindling and could run out soon. More than 1,300 Israelis have been killed since Saturday's attack, including over 200 soldiers. Meanwhile, more than 1,400 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes. And the US Secretary of State has been reassuring the Israeli Prime Minister of Washington's support during a trip to the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu insists Hamas should be treated exactly the same as ISIS. Anthony Blinken says he knows the terrorist group does not represent the Palestinian people or their legitimate aspirations. He told the Israeli Prime Minister that as long as America exists, Israel will never have to defend itself on its own.
We must stand together, resolved to confront what is worst among humanity with what is best. We must provide an alternative to the vision of violence and fear, nihilism and terror presented by Hamas. That is what the United States will do, standing with Israel, working together with its people, and all those in this region who remain committed to the vision of a more peaceful, more integrated, a more secure, a more prosperous Middle East.
Well, Anthony Blinken also says he's trying to secure the release of hostages kidnapped by Hamas. More than 100 Israeli and foreign hostages have been taken by the terrorist group into Gaza. Noam Sagi is his British Israeli mother is among those hostages.
Right now I was supposed to go and be on my way to pick her up, and she was very much looking forward to come here and celebrate with her. You know, it's just heartbreaking. Every picture I see, it's people I grew up with, it's people I know. My main message today is for the immediate release of all the civilians, especially the under 18 and the over 65.
Well, the government is organising flights for British nationals in Israel, with the first due to leave Tel Aviv for the UK today. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, urging British citizens who wish to get out to register their presence. Those eligible have been told not to go to airports unless instructed to do so. Meanwhile, His Majesty the King has met with the Chief Rabbi to express his support for the Jewish community in the UK. King Charles and Ephraim Mirvis discussed events in Israel and how to promote interfaith harmony in Britain. It comes amid a 300% rise in incidents of anti-Semitism in the UK since Hamas's attack in Israel. The Community Security Trust recording 89 incidents, including assaults, damage to Jewish property and abusive behaviour. Now, judges in England and Wales are being told to postpone jail sentences for some offenders because prisons are too overcrowded. It comes after the government said it plans to rent prison spaces from foreign countries in an effort to address chronic overcrowding. The Ministry of Justice says the government has done more than ever to protect the public and keep offenders locked up for longer. Now, as you've been hearing, Bernie Ecclestone has been handed a 17-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty to fraud. The ex-Formula One boss will also have to pay £652 million to HMRC. He appeared at London's Southwark Crown Court this morning after failing to declare more than £400 million of overseas assets to the government. The billionaire turns 93 later this month. He had been due to face trial in November after he'd previously denied the charge. Now, an MP for the Scottish National Party has defected to the Tories amid reports of a toxic and bullying culture in the party's Westminster group. Lisa Cameron's defection comes as she was facing a selection battle to be the candidate for the seat in the west of Scotland. She says she's been a victim of group bullying at Westminster and has suffered panic attacks as a result. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he's delighted Miss Cameron has joined the Scottish Conservative Party. That's it. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, yes, the King has held talks with the Chief Rabbi at Buckingham Palace. They discussed the horrors of recent events in Israel and ways to support interfaith harmony in Britain in these distressing and dangerous times that we live in. But it comes as the first government-arranged flight for British nationals out of Israel is expected to depart Tel Aviv later. Well, GB News' Charlie Peters reports on the build-up to what looks to be an all-out invasion of Gaza.
A relentless pounding. Israeli jets hitting targets in Gaza, reducing neighbourhoods to rubble, forcing hundreds of thousands of the city's inhabitants to flee their homes and try to find shelter. 65% of Gaza's 2.3 million population has now been displaced. The huge death toll is rising by the hour, with thousands wounded. Water and electricity supplies have been cut. The International Committee of the Red Cross says there is still some fuel left to operate generators, mainly in hospitals, but that will soon run out. The blockade and airstrikes, Israel's retaliation for the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israeli towns, kibbutzes and army bases near the border, which have so far claimed the lives of more than 1,200 civilians and soldiers and injured nearly 3,000. And dozens of hostages taken by Hamas terrorists into Gaza, their fate unknown. With Israel preparing to send in hundreds of thousands of troops into Gaza in a land invasion, allies are calling on the Israeli government to operate by the rules of war and to try to limit civilian casualties.
Of course, civilian casualties need to be minimised, and that's what the Foreign Secretary was clear about yesterday. But it is the case that Israel needs to be able to defend itself from these attacks, to rescue the hostages that have been taken and to deter future attacks of the sort that we've seen.
As the conflict spirals, the US has sent its top diplomat on a mission to try to prevent a wider war from erupting in the region, while at the same time showing solidarity with the Israeli people.
We must stand together, resolved to confront what is worst among humanity with what is best. We must provide an alternative to the vision of violence and fear, nihilism and terror presented by Hamas.
As Israel continues to bury its dead, the country is still reeling from the shock of the Hamas attacks, as families try to come to terms with the enormity of what has happened. As details continue to emerge of how Hamas terrorists attacked and killed Israeli men, women and children in their homes, the Israeli president has told reporters that some bodies recovered showed signs of torture. And among Hamas equipment found in one of the communities attacked near the border, Israeli defense forces say they've recovered an ISIS flag. All this as Israel's political leaders unite to form a war coalition with one aim: to defeat Hamas and any others who threaten the existence of Israel. As Israel prepares for all-out war, neighbouring countries are trying to find a way to get aid into Gaza. This Jordanian military flight has been loaded with supplies in the hope of getting to the Egyptian border crossing with Gaza if possible. At the same time, there are calls for a humanitarian corridor out of Gaza as the bombardment continues. With the most vulnerable stuck inside the city and having to use schools as shelter, negotiations are intensifying about how to create some sort of humanitarian corridor to allow civilians a safe passage out of the conflict. Charlie Peters, GB News, Israel.
Live now to Tel Aviv with Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you very much. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. I understand that Israel has now bombed a couple of airports in Syria. Is that right?
That's right. The Aleppo and Damascus international airports have been bombed by the Israeli Air Force in the last few hours. The runways have been neutralized. They can't be used. This comes amid what was almost certainly a strategy to reduce access for Iranian proxies in the region to gain support from Iranian assets in Syria, particularly the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which we know is very active up there and supports Lebanese Hezbollah and other actors in Syria, which are causing quite a lot of trouble for the Israeli Defense Forces in the north of the country. In the south, though, in the last hour, we have heard about another terrorist being killed by the IDF in a kibbutz that endured some attacks over the weekend when Hamas militants obviously crossed the border there. In the south, more details have been released in the last hour about some of those atrocities committed over the weekend. There have been reports about how people were killed in their homes, slaughtered in their beds, babies killed and babies burnt. And very troublingly, the Prime Minister's office has taken the decision in the last hour to actually release some of those images online to really put it to bed for once and for all that this really did happen. Obviously, it's an extremely devastating bit of news to break, but yeah, I think for many people there were concerns that these reports were just filtering out without confirmation. But when there's news of such atrocities, they need to prove them as they try and pose this idea that Hamas is committing ISIS-like butchery in the south of Israel. Earlier today, the IDF also claimed to have seized an ISIS flag among Hamas fighters in one of the kibbutz. And yeah, after reviewing those images, I think it's clear that much of the butchery that the Israeli state has referred to really has happened.
Yeah, exactly. Charlie, thank you very much for all of that and everything that you're doing for us out there. We'll go back to Charlie Peters, of course, if there are any updates, when there are any updates from Israel. Joining me now, though, I'm very pleased to say, is a journalist at the Times of Israel. It's Amy Spiro. Amy, thank you. I've got to ask, how do you feel about the Israeli government taking the unprecedented step of proving the actions of Hamas by putting out some of the most graphic images, which obviously we're not going to show, of the worst things that you could ever imagine, really, including young infants. So how do you feel about the fact that they felt forced to put that out there?
You know, it's not something I would ever want anybody to have to see, but the fact is this is a move that obviously came after people have tried to discredit these reports. And despite all the horrible images and first-person accounts and eyewitness reports that have already been out there, there's still so many people who are trying to say that this didn't happen or it didn't really happen. Arguments over, oh, well, Hamas did kill babies and maybe they did behead babies, but they didn't behead 40 babies. And when you're getting into those kind of arguments, it's sort of, you know, hard to really understand that kind of rhetoric. And I guess that's why the Prime Minister's office made that decision.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous argument to have, isn't it, really? The manner in which they kill babies, as if that really matters, you know, as if that really matters once the atrocity has been committed. Look, what do the people of Israel want now, then? I mean, do they want the evisceration of Gaza? I mean, is that the only option?
Obviously, I don't speak for all 10 million citizens of Israel. I think people are, you know, the evisceration of Hamas, certainly, taking out every top, you know, operative in that terror group that committed such atrocities. People are not going to be, you know, people are not going to settle for anything that's short term, that for anything that seems like an interim solution. I mean, for 15 years, Israel has been fighting with Gaza and rockets have continued. And every, you know, period of time, there's a flare up. And now there's just a thought that we can't go back to this.
Is there any backlash? Yeah, Amy, is there any backlash at all to the idea that Egypt warned Israel that there was going to be some kind of attack in the days leading up to it, and yet it still happened?
Listen, there's certainly a lot of extremely deep anger at the Israeli government, at the Israeli military. Obviously, there was a massive failure of intelligence of operations, not just in not being able to know this was coming, but also in the immediate response. Hours and hours where people were locked up in their homes, fighting alone, were wondering if someone was going to come and save them. So the anger is visceral. The backlash is, obvious and deep. Specific Egyptian claims, whatever it is, we're still, there's going to be a long time. We're going to be dissecting and talking about this for months, years, decades, probably, to see what went wrong. But there's certainly just, shock and horror and fury.
Concern, presumably, about the hostages that appear to be still in Gaza. I just wonder, with an ongoing bombardment of Gaza, the potential for a ground incursion there, with respect, does hope fade of actually getting those hostages back, do you think?
Obviously, the hostages being held there, and we still don't even know exactly how many, maybe 150, maybe 200, are, really top of the mind of every Israeli, and obviously certainly of all the families of the missing. I saw this horrible interview earlier today with the father of an 8-year-old girl who was missing for days, and he finally found out that she'd been killed, and he was happy to find out that she wasn't in Gaza because he was scared that would be a fate worse than death. So there's concerns of every family, there's concerns of every Israeli, and we don't know what's going to happen.
Are you okay to carry on for another couple of minutes, or do you feel like you need a little bit of... Yeah? OK. Thank you, Amy. The feeling amongst Israelis clearly is absolutely devastating, must be one of fear. How do you react to the former leader of Hamas calling for an international day of jihad amongst the Muslim world? So, frankly, all of your neighbours there in that region.
Yeah, not the friendliest of neighbours in this region. We've seen already the way the Arab world has reacted, the way people have celebrated massacres, the way people are lauding the killing of babies and the capturing of elderly Holocaust survivors. We've seen that happening. And unfortunately, we've seen it happen in Western countries as well, in European countries, even in the US, celebratory rallies. So, Israel knows it has its allies and Israel knows it has its enemies. And that's always been the case.
Yeah, it's certainly been something that's been an eye-opener here in this country for a lot of people. We've seen a massive rise in not just anti-Semitism, but these celebrations of the horrors that have taken place over there across different towns in the UK or different cities in the UK, but also across Europe as well, in Sydney and Australia, in America, and from London. Well, there you go. That's some imagery there from London. I suppose at times like this, Israel really needs its friends. The fact that the BBC can't call Hamas terrorists, what would your message to the BBC be?
I personally don't have a message to the BBC, but I know that I was at a briefing earlier today with President Isaac Herzog with a lot of foreign media outlets, and he was particularly angry, first of all, at some of the questions he got, but also at news organizations that refuse to label this kind of thing terrorism. He said, if you can't look at someone who's slaughtering a baby in their bed and not call that a terrorist, then, I'm not sure what to even say.
No, OK. Amy, well, can I ask you just one last one with you as well, if that's all right? Whereabouts are you based now then yourself, and what's it like for you?
I'm in Jerusalem, so it's been, one would say, relatively quiet. It's sort of hard to say relatively quiet when we've had, only 6 or 7 air raid sirens. That's not a normal level of quiet, but things are just, aside from that, things are just tense, and people don't know what to do with themselves.
Do people think that the blockade of Gaza is the only way? Because clearly, some people will say, well, look, there's a distinction between Hamas and the people who live in Gaza, and that if they all have to suffer, is that fair? I'm just playing devil's advocate here. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. Israel has been providing the electricity and water and allowing fuel through for a long time to Gaza. Obviously, Israel's been accused of blockading the Strip for so long, but we could see that Hamas has managed to accumulate an incredible amount of weaponry and, guns and trucks and everything they used in this assault. The idea of collective punishment is not what people are looking for, but the fact is that Hamas has taken every ounce of humanitarian aid and everything that crosses those borders, and instead of investing them in infrastructure and electricity and everything that they could be for their people, they've invested it in weapons and rockets and ways to kill more people. So, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza is enormous. The suffering there is horrible. And it's because of what Hamas has been doing there since it took over.
OK, Amy, thank you very much, and take care. Of course, there's Amy Spiro there, who's journalist at the Times of Israel. Right, well, you are watching and listening to GB News. Coming up very shortly, convicted criminals could be spared jail because our prisons are too full. And, of course, we will have all the latest from France as well, where we are expecting a pro-Hamas rally to erupt at any moment in Paris. I'm particularly keen to see how the police handle that over there and whether or not our police could take any lessons from that. Get your views coming in, anything that you have heard or seen over the course of this show so far. GBviews at GBnews.com. What do you want our police force to do if people go out there and do celebrate what's going on in Israel at the moment? Some different news coming your way as well. It's not all as absolutely heavy as what's been going on. I do appreciate that it is incredibly serious news that's taking place and very distressing news that's taking place in Israel at the moment. So it's not all that bad. I will be telling you about the invasion of Chinese crabs into Britain later on as well. So something a little bit different for you. Patrick Christys on GB News. We are Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Welcome back. You are watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Loads more to bring you between now and 6 p.m. In fact, very shortly, I will speak with one of the lawyers who has written to Ofcom about the BBC over their refusal to label Hamas terrorists. Ofcom, by the way, have just issued a statement not so long ago saying it's essentially up to the individual broadcaster what they say or do. But there have been reports in The Times, in other news, that rapists could avoid prison from next week due to changes to sentencing guidelines as a result of the soaring prison population. This comes as the government sought to clear the court backlogs and even apparently floated the idea of housing prisoners abroad. Given the fact that we can't even get anyone abroad at the moment, if they've entered this country illegally, I would be amazed if we managed to actually transport actual British citizens to a foreign prison. But GB News understands that suspected offenders will be kept out on bail from Monday, but it will only be criminals deemed not to be a risk to the public. Again, just want to emphasise that some of the people who make the decisions about who is and is not a risk to the public are some of the people who initially wanted John Warboys to be released from prison or Colin Pitchfork to be released from prison. So, you know, I'm not necessarily that OK with the decision-making. But alas, joining me now is a retired prison governor and author is Vanessa Frake. Vanessa, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Right, so we potentially will have, well, serious violent offenders, including maybe rapists, who could be out on the streets because there's no room for them in prison. Is that right? Is that where we've got to?
Well, I mean, this isn't a new thing, first off. You know, we chat about overcrowding in prisons, well, it seems at the moment, on a daily basis. My understanding of what was released was that those that are currently on bail will be delayed in having their sentence if they get a guilty verdict. Right. So, to my mind, those that are on bail are not murderers and rapists per se. So I would be absolutely flabbergasted if they started releasing rapists and murderers on bail and let them out in the general public.
Do you think the general public has a right to be very, very concerned about safety on our streets? I mean, if we're hearing that prisons are full, then criminals are hearing that prisons are full. And if I was a criminal, that would probably make me more inclined to go and commit crime, knowing that I'm not going to go to prison.
I think the general public has every right to know, absolutely. I think they expect value for money from the prison service, but unfortunately they're not getting that with the state of our prison service. You know, I've said this many, many times, you know, prisons like Wandsworth are designed to hold about 960 odd prisoners. They're actually locking up 1,600 just about. You know, this is monumentous. Like it's something like 200% overcrowding. It's ridiculous. That together with staff shortages, with poor equipment, with poorly maintained jails, you know, our prison service is on its knees.
Well, it's just a potent cocktail of disaster, isn't it? Because we are, you know, seeing rapid population growth. We're not updating our infrastructure whatsoever, easy for me to say. And, you know, and we're seeing also people more inclined to use weapons on the streets. I mean, you know, you end up in a situation where you just, unfortunately, you have a choice, which is, if we're not going to build more prisons, which apparently we're not really doing, either trying to kind of level down and release people earlier or not send people to prison for a variety of different crimes, or, you know, you just have more lawless streets, really, which is pretty bad all round, Vanessa, I think.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree with you, Patrick, but what you have to remember is there's an awful lot of prisoners who are locked up who shouldn't be locked up. There are prisoners who have mental health issues, you know, that they are deemed to be the only place to put them is in jail. There are many, many foreign national prisoners. And because the deportation papers take over 12 months, they are clogging up our prison system.
Well, that's
so
if we
it's
ever manage to get them deported anyway, to be fair. I mean, you know,
well, there you go.
They can
Seemingly, we can send them abroad.
They can often get a reprieve whilst on the tarmac. But Vanessa, look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. It's Vanessa Freight there, who's a retired prison governor and an author as well. Look, coming up, OK, so the BBC, as always, has landed itself in hot water over its coverage of the Israel-Hamas war. But does this point to a deeper problem at the corporation? When I come back, I will be talking to a lawyer who has reported the BBC to Ofcom, and I'm looking forward to getting their reaction to Ofcom's latest statement, which basically says, hey, it's up to each individual broadcaster how they label things like terrorist organisations. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Well, the top stories this hour. The US Secretary of State has been reassuring the Israeli Prime Minister of Washington's support during a trip to the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu insists Hamas should be treated exactly as ISIS. Anthony Blinken says he knows the terrorist group does not represent the Palestinian people or their legitimate aspirations. He told the Prime Minister that as long as America exists, Israel will never have to defend itself on its own. Here at home, Bernie Ecclestone has been handed a 17-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty to fraud. The ex-Formula One boss will also have to pay £652 million to HMRC. That's after failing to declare more than £400 million of overseas assets to the government. And an MP for the Scottish National Party has defected to the Tories amid reports of toxicity and bullying in the party's Westminster group. Lisa Cameron's defection comes as she was facing selection battle to be the candidate for a seat in the west of Scotland. She says she's a victim of group bullying at Westminster and has suffered panic attacks as a result. Those are the top stories. More on our website, gbnews.com.
I've been looking forward to this. So the BBC have been reported to Ofcom over the refusal of the broadcaster to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. 5 lawyers wrote to the regulator and accused the broadcaster of failing to show impartiality beyond doubt, urging Ofcom to investigate the BBC. But what's next for the BBC? Have they fallen well below the standards expressed in their editorial values? It appears that Ofcom have no intention of getting involved as it currently stands. But I'm joined now by barrister Jeremy Breer, who wrote, along with a few other people, of course, this complaint letter to Ofcom. Thank you very much for joining me. Great to have you on the show. So why did you feel compelled to do that?
Well, Patrick, let me be very clear why. We all woke up in the Jewish community and in the wider community on Saturday morning, witnessing scenes of really unparalleled tragedy, a massacre of 1,000 innocent people, many women, children, babies, as we've now found out, by Hamas in Israel. So the scale of what we saw was horrendous, the worst terrorist attack, I think, since 9/11, as it's been described. And yet we also then had to suffer the secondary indignity of not having it reported accurately. So we switch on our national broadcaster, as people do sometimes when they're not watching GBNews or any of the other stations, and they see that these people that have perpetrated these outrages against innocents are being described in this sort of slightly sanitized language of militant groups, as though they're a sort of local have-a-go hero freedom fighter, as opposed to a group that is as bad as ISIS in every respect.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the usual lovey types are ominously quiet over this as well. I mean, Gary Lineker is suspiciously silent. But is this the first time that the Jewish community has felt let down by the BBC? I sense not.
No, I think that this description, this use of language has been ruminated upon previously, and there have been all sorts of discussions that have gone on behind the scenes, but it has never been so egregiously felt as this weekend. I mean, I fully appreciate that a national broadcaster is in a difficult situation, that it has journalists on the front line and that it has a number of competing interest groups. But there are some things in life that are very clear. And Hamas being a terrorist group is not just clear to normal human beings, it's a matter of law. They're a proscribed group as a matter of statute under the Terrorism Act. And all of your viewers, I would say, all of your viewers will realise and will see instantly that a group that beheads babies are terrorists. And describing them in this way is deeply offensive.
Yeah, so go on then. Why do you think the BBC is so reluctant to call this what it is? What is it about the BBC, do you think? What is it about the editorial charter?
It's probably I can only speculate because I mean my expertise is in the law, not in the media. But I suppose they've been trying very hard to keep everybody happy in some way, and therefore they think using certain types of language is the right thing to do. But interestingly, as I pointed out in the letter that we wrote yesterday, when you actually depart from the true, accurate legal word, which is terrorist, you become partial. It's impartial to use the accurate word. The accurate word is terrorist. That's the legal word. Hamas are a prescribed terrorist group. So when you actually choose to not use that word, you step into the arena yourself and actually become a side taker. So ironically, the BBC have really done exactly what they set out not to do. They wanted to please everyone, and they've actually ended up taking sides.
I can definitely see that school of thought. Can I just read you the latest that I've got here anyway from Ofcom? Just get your reaction to this. Look, and for what it's worth as well, I am, as I'm sure you can appreciate, not always in the business of calling for increased Ofcom action, but Ofcom are saying the responsibility for journalistic editorial guidelines rests with each broadcaster, provided they meet Ofcom rules on due accuracy in news and due impartiality in news and current affairs. It is for broadcasters to decide the vocabulary they use to describe unfolding events. My interpretation of that is Ofcom have basically said, this is for the BBC to do what they want, and they obviously don't want to call Hamas terrorists.
Well, let's see about that, because the critical thing in that letter, or that statement, was provided they meet the impartiality guidelines that they have to meet. And the letter that I wrote, along with Lord Panic and Lord Grabiner and Lord Wolfson and Lord Pollock, I'm the only non-lord, as you'll have probably noted, but still, Patrick, we said very clearly in that letter, you have this responsibility to be impartial when you choose to use the less accurate word, the sanitized word, the watered down word. That's not impartial. That's actually stepping into the debate and taking sides.
Yeah, indeed. All right. So do you want an apology from the BBC then?
Not really. I'm not particularly interested in apologies. I'm interested in accurate reporting going forward. I want the British public to understand that Israel is facing a terrorist organisation and a terrorist threat, much like ISIS. I don't really want to enter into the politics any further than that. I want to simply make sure that the British public understand what's really going on.
Yeah, no, fair enough. There appears to be... in light of the fact that in the last half hour or so, Israel's Twitter account and Israeli leadership has decided to take the unprecedented step of publishing some incredibly graphic pictures, which obviously we're not going to do here now, of babies, etc., because there was this clamour for proof that to prove that the Israelis were not lying about some of the atrocities that were committed by Hamas. A clamour that I don't think has existed in previous conflicts or when previous groups of people have made claims. Are you concerned about that? There seemed to be a non-belief, really, of these claims by Israel. I just wonder what you think that kind of says about the attitudes maybe towards Israel, towards Israelis.
Yes, I think that's a very fair point. It was quite extraordinary, wasn't it, when these revelations came to light, I think yesterday, about decapitated babies and teenagers that have been raped in terrible circumstances, many abducted and murdered. And the first response of some of the armchair warriors on social media who love to try and hold Israel to a double standard is to say, oh no, it can't possibly be true. Where's the evidence? No one should publish any of this. Well, they asked, and the evidence has now been provided. So I look forward to all those people now saying, well, thank you for providing the evidence. I fully accept that what Israel said was true, because it was, unfortunately.
Well, unfortunately, and demonstrably true in shockingly graphic detail. I'm afraid. Well, go on. Yeah.
Sometimes we just can't believe as human beings what other human beings are capable of. And I'm afraid with Hamas, you have that in spades, in bucket loads. And that's why it's so important that we call them what they are.
Yeah, you mentioned the law, clearly, throughout the context of this conversation. One of the concerns that I would have going forward, I'm sure plenty of people do have going forward, is this so-called International Day of Jihad, or whatever they want to call it, tomorrow, which is supposed to be limited to the Arab world. I think, given the fact that we've seen instances in London, in Sheffield, in Australia, in America, in Berlin, probably, quite possibly now in France, actually, which we're thinking of going to a bit later on. The Netherlands, yeah, take your pick, basically. Throw a dart at the map of the world, and there's probably been some quite fruity behaviour taking place there in the last few weeks, or the last few days, I should say. The police, I think, need to be acutely aware of the powers that they have when it comes to people supporting a terror group, right? I would imagine that's something that you want to see them exercise. Is that right?
Absolutely, Patrick. I mean, this so-called Day of Jihad undoubtedly has spread fear through the Jewish and wider communities in our country. We're horrified by some of the things that we've seen on the streets. And as I know, most right-thinking members of the public are, Jewish or non-Jewish, because I've been inundated with correspondence to that effect. And what I say really is, I really hope the police are listening. They've been warned. We need the police. We need them to act. We don't need them standing there, taking selfies, discussing the matter, thinking about things. We need them to act to protect our children.
Yeah, you've got to get people wrapped up and moved on ASAP, really, before the kind of rot sets in, I think. But look, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. Great to have you on the show. And obviously, good luck with everything going forward. That is Barrister Jeremy Breer, who was one of the people who wrote that complaint to Ofcom. Right, OK, so yeah, coming up in just a moment, it's fair to say this is a little bit of a shift in tone, but quite possibly needed, I think. It's been a very heavy news hour, hasn't it? So, a critter has landed on our shores. Yes, that's right. It's terrifying, isn't it? We've been warned to brace for an invasion of Chinese crabs. But are these nippers here already? They are here already, I think. That's my understanding of them. I'll be telling you exactly why they get a rather unusual name as well. We'll zoom in on their claws and you'll be able to see. But watch out, dog walkers and seaside goers everywhere. The Chinese crabs are about. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. You are watching and listening to me, Patrick Christys, here on GB News. I do believe that I have a little bit of news to bring you right now, actually, which is in relation to an ongoing incident potentially at Stansted Airport. This is a message from Essex Police, which is that we are currently attending an incident at Stansted Airport. They say that a flight travelling from Nairobi to Heathrow was diverted to Stansted this afternoon. The airport does remain open. I will bring you more information on that as we get it. But again, other reports coming out now saying that RAF fighter jets escorted a Kenya Airways flight to Stansted Airport. And apparently, bomb disposal teams have been called. More on this as we get it. But social media has whipped up a storm criticising electric vehicles after it was widely speculated that an EV caused the Luton Airport fire, an airport theme to this segment. Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Service has been revealed that the blaze was started now by a diesel car, they're saying. So it's misinformation left, right and centre when it comes to the initial cause of this vehicle fire. Recently, more than 230 Porsche electric vehicles have been recalled following 2 battery fires in Australia. So, look, are electric vehicles actually dangerous? Joining me now is the Managing Director of Motorwise Automotive, Fraser Brown. Thank you very much. Great to see you there. So, are electric vehicles dangerous?
Bottom line is no. They're less dangerous than internal combustion engines. It's a myth. But let's be really honest about this. Anybody that can find negative things to say about electric vehicles, they will do. They'll have you believe all kinds of myths. I was sent on WhatsApp last night by my daughter a message and saying, Dad, you need to look at this. And there was a picture of the fire in the multi-storey car park at Luton Airport. And a well-known social media person, Katie Hopkins, explaining that it was an electric vehicle that had started it, or certainly hinting that it was an electric vehicle that started it. You know, I thought, well, we've heard quite a lot about electric vehicles setting fire. What's the reality? Let's have a look at some numbers. So I managed to find some numbers from America, which showed that if you take 100,000 vehicles with an internal combustion engine, during their lifetime, about 1.25% of them may catch fire at some point. If you take the same information and look at it for 100,000 electric vehicles, it's 0.025. So the statistics clearly state that an internal combustion engine or a normal vehicle that we've been used to for the last 50 years is more likely to catch fire than an electric vehicle. Obviously, electric vehicles aren't quite as old yet, so maybe those figures will change. But some great numbers there from
I suppose that's all we've got to go off. My concern was a bit around, we saw things like electric scooters. People were saying, don't put an electric scooter in the hallway of your block of flats or something, just in case that goes pop. And I wondered if we were going to see that playing out now with electric cars. But you seem relatively confident that electric cars are not, well, essentially mobile bombs.
Well, absolutely not. Let's think, what is a bomb? A bomb is something that has explosives in it. It normally has something to detonate the explosives, possibly electricity. And what do we have that most resembles that we're all in all of the time? And that is a car. With a petrol tank on it. Petrol is one of the most explosive substances that we all come into contact with on a daily basis. You combine that with either friction from brakes on a car that warms up the discs, or possibly with an electrical current. And you'll find that those two things will ignite petrol very, very effectively. You don't have petrol in an electric vehicle, so it's much, much safer intrinsically.
All right, look, thank you very, very much, Fraser. Great to have you on the show. And I must say, I'm absolutely loving the backdrop as well. It's very on-brand.
Yeah, we're outside...
Go on.
Lexus in Hull. We're in a good northern city. Just happened to be here when the call came in. Thank you.
No, good. It's good to get out and about. Break the old Westminster bubble, as they say. Thank you very much. Fraser Brown there. Of course, he's the Managing Director of Motorvise Automotive. Right, look, just a quick reminder. This is a developing story. We'll have a bit more on this later on. Essex Police is attending an incident at Stansted Airport after a Kenya Airways plane from Nairobi to Heathrow was diverted. A London Stansted spokeswoman said that the Boeing 787 landed safely with Essex Police in attendance. But again, want to emphasise that is a developing story. More on that as we get it. I just about have time now to bring you very concerning reports that the great Chinese mitten crab has invaded the UK. A map shows how the semi-furred clawed creatures have spread across the UK. Oh, it's an epidemic. Look at it. There you go. If you're listening on radio, there's red dots everywhere along the British coastline. This really is something we have to take incredibly seriously. Experts have warned that they are endangering British riverbanks and they can give you a painful nip if threatened. So there you go. They, of course, in case you are really wondering about why they get the name mitten crab, is that they just have strangely furry claws. They look a bit, well, they look horrible, don't they? I don't know about you, but I think those things look absolutely disgusting, and I am terrified of them. Apparently, dog walkers, it's always the dog walkers, isn't it? Dog walkers are being told that they need to take extra care because if your pooch is sniffing around in the undergrowth somewhere near a riverbank and, they might get a nip on the nose by a Chinese mitten crab, and we wouldn't want that, would we? So there you go. Beware the Chinese mitten crabs. Sometimes we get, killer Asian hornets. There's usually a couple of those spotted somewhere like the Isle of Wight every now and again, and that's a fear for all of our lives. But the Chinese mitten crab, that's the one we really need to be very, very wary of. But don't go anywhere, as I will have the latest for you on matters a lot more serious on the fast-moving situation in Israel, as we tackle as well the BBC's bias on this story, all of that, and live from France as well, where we're expecting a Hamas demonstration in Paris. How will the police deal with that? Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Alex Berkell. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, when we have some pretty wet and windy weather waiting to push its way into southern parts as we go through the next 12 hours or so. That's in association with an area of low pressure just to the southwest of the UK that's currently tracking towards us. What it means is as we go through the end of Thursday, yes, it's a cloudy picture, but it's going to turn increasingly wet and windy as we go through tonight and into the early hours of Friday morning. Slightly drier further north across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland and into Scotland, but even here we are expecting some blustery, showery weather to push its way southwards. Could turn a little chilly for some sheltered spots of Scotland. Otherwise, under the cloud and rain, it's going to be fairly mild. So Friday then, a wet picture across many parts of England and Wales. Watch out for some high totals of rain, could cause some disruptions, some localised flooding, and even some heavy thundery, showery rain could affect more southern counties. Blustery showers affecting parts of Scotland and perhaps Northern Ireland too, but a greater chance of seeing some bright and sunny spells here. Coldest though towards the north. In the south, could be a little bit muggy at times with highs of around 21, possibly 22 Celsius. By Saturday, it is going to be markedly colder. Arctic air plunging its way down from the north, and in that northerly wind, likely to see quite a few showers around. These could turn wintry over the Scottish high ground, but by Sunday and into Monday, I'm expecting it to be largely dry for all of us.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, busy hour coming your way. Of course, we'll have the latest as Israel fights back. When will that ground incursion actually occur? We are hearing now that there have been missiles fired into Syria and airports there damaged. So a lot still going on in Israel, but also I'm going to be talking about this as well. Supposedly there's going to be some kind of pro-Hamas demonstration in Paris, which we're hoping to be able to take to you live. I am particularly intrigued to see how the police handle that, mainly because the former leader of Hamas, has called for an international day of Jihad tomorrow, with Muslims everywhere rising up. So how will the police in Paris handle it? Will it be a lesson or otherwise for our police here if there are any issues going forward? I'll also be talking about this topic as well. The royals have caused a big rumble here. So we've had our king and our queen and our future king and queen coming out and expressing explicit support for Israel, really. Are they right to get involved in what is probably the most political issue ever? Israel-Palestine, the most highly politicised issue ever. So, are the royals right to cause that particular ruckus? In other news, we're talking about this as well. Yeah, I know, this is real. So, a man has been named Woman of the Year. Why does this stuff keep happening? Patrick Christys, GB News. For want of a better phrase, it's a bit nuts, isn't it? But gbviews@gbnews.com. Get those emails coming in thick and fast. Polly Middlehurst now, though, with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you, and good evening to you. We start this bulletin with some breaking news within the last 10 minutes or so. We've heard that Essex police have put out a statement. They say they're responding to an incident at Stansted Airport after a flight that was en route from Nairobi in Kenya to Heathrow had to be diverted there. We understand RAF Typhoon fighter jets reportedly intercepting that Kenya Airways flight. Some other details emerging on the internet that we're trying to stand up for you and confirm before we bring you any more detail on that. But that is the story at the moment that is coming to us. A flight has been diverted from Nairobi to Stansted instead of landing at Heathrow. Police are in attendance. Well, also in the news today, the Palestinian president has condemned violence against civilians. Mahmoud Abbas said the killing or abuse of civilians contravenes morals, religion and international law. His comments come as vital medical supplies run dangerously low in Gaza, with the Red Cross warning the situation is deteriorating fast. The only remaining power station stopped working yesterday. Fuel supplies are also dwindling and could run out within hours. More than 1,300 Israelis have been killed since Saturday's attack, including over 200 soldiers. Meanwhile, more than 1,400 Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes. Well, the US Secretary of State has reassured the Israeli Prime Minister of Washington's support during his trip to the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu insisted, though, that Hamas should be treated exactly the same way as ISIS. Antony Blinken said he knows the terrorist group does not represent the Palestinian people or their legitimate aspirations. He told the Prime Minister of Israel that as long as America exists, Israel will never have to defend itself on its own. And later on, he became emotional while meeting a survivor of the music festival attack in Tel Aviv.
We must stand together, resolved to confront what is worst among humanity with what is best. We must provide an alternative to the vision of violence and fear, nihilism and terror presented by Hamas. That is what the United States will do, standing with Israel, working together with its people, and all those in this region who remain committed to the vision of a more peaceful, a more integrated, a more secure, a more prosperous Middle East.
Well, Antony Blinken also said he's trying to secure the release of hostages kidnapped by Hamas. More than 100 Israeli and foreign hostages have been taken by the terrorist group into Gaza. Noam Sagi is a British Israeli whose mother is among the hostages.
Right now I was supposed to go and be on my way to pick her up. And she was very much looking forward to come here and celebrate with her. You know, it's just heartbreaking. Every picture I see, it's people I grew up with, it's people I know. My main message today is for the immediate release of all the civilians, especially the under 18 and the over 65.
Meanwhile, the UK government is organising flights for British nationals in Israel, with the first due to leave Tel Aviv for the UK today. The Foreign Secretary James Cleverly urging British citizens who wish to get out of the region to register their presence. Those eligible have been told not to go to airports yet unless instructed to do so. Meanwhile, here in the UK, His Majesty the King has met with the Chief Rabbi to express his support for the Jewish community in the UK. King Charles and Sir Ephraim Mirvis discussed events in Israel and how to support interfaith harmony in Britain. It comes amid a 300% rise in incidents of anti-Semitism in the UK since Hamas's attack on Israel. The Community Security Trust recorded 89 separate incidents, including assaults, damage to Jewish property and abusive behaviour. Now, judges in England and Wales are being told to postpone jail sentences for some offenders because prisons are too crowded. It comes after the government said it plans to rent prison spaces from foreign countries in an effort to address chronic overcrowding. The Ministry of Justice says the government has done more than ever before to protect the public and keep offenders locked up for longer. Bernie Ecclestone has been handed a 17-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty to fraud. The ex-Formula One boss will also have to pay £652 million to HMRC. He appeared at London's Southwark Crown Court this morning after failing to declare more than £400 million of overseas assets to the government. The billionaire turns 93 later this month. He'd been due to face trial in November after he'd previously denied the charge. And an MP for the Scottish National Party has defected to the Conservatives amid reports of a toxic and bullying culture in the party's Westminster group. Lisa Cameron's defection comes as she was facing a selection battle to be the candidate for a seat in the west of Scotland. She says she's been the victim of group bullying at Westminster and has even suffered panic attacks as a result. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says he's delighted Miss Cameron has joined the Scottish Conservatives. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
British and European authorities need to say no to jihad on our streets. We are not a fundamentalist Muslim continent. We never will be. Sharia law will never be for us, and we do not have blasphemy laws, and we will not play host to foreign historic drama and conflict spilling onto our streets. I say this in light of the fact that there are calls for an International Day of Jihad to take place tomorrow, appropriately on Friday the 13th. The former Hamas leader has told Muslims to take to the streets. Khaled Mashal led Hamas from 2004 to 2017. Now lives in Qatar, and he wants the Arab and Muslim world to rise up. But the thing is, this won't end up just being the Arab world, will it? Today, for example, in about an hour or so's time, apparently, there is set to be a pro-Hamas rally in Paris, which obviously has the potential to turn very ugly very quickly. We've seen incidents in America, Australia, Sheffield, London, Berlin, the Netherlands. I could go on. It's not going to take much, is it, for the elements of the Muslim community that happen to hate Israel, that diaspora, across Europe, to see some form of the day of jihad taking place in the Middle East and respond to their brothers and sisters by taking to the streets here themselves. Now, I just don't think that we can have that, really. That would be openly supporting a terror group, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be openly supporting terrorist activity? I know that Jews on the streets of Britain and Europe will basically just have to stay inside tomorrow, just in case. And what is the world coming to there? Brits will just have to suck it up, will we? And allow more incidents of people marching through the streets supporting a terror group? I don't think so. Britain and Europe has to decide right now how it's going to deal with a potential uprising, because in the coming days, the situation in Israel and Gaza and the Middle East is going to step up a notch or two. And Britain and Europe stands with Israel. They've made that very clear. Yet within each European nation, there are clearly pockets of support for Hamas, for the destruction of the Jewish race and for the eradication of Israel. There is an important distinction to be made, absolutely vital, between people who simply want those in Gaza, so Palestinians, to have a better life, and those who cross that boundary towards supporting a terrorist organisation. Now, I don't want to tar everybody with the same brush, but right now, We have a former leader of a prescribed terrorist organisation calling for an anti-Israeli Muslim uprising, and we need to make it clear that if you take part in that in Britain, you get locked up. We have had to deal with a heck of a lot of incidents have frustrated certain elements of a more fundamentalist Muslim community, such as the Batley Grammar School protests, for example, widely reported. Now, our police force needs to crack down immediately if it appears that people in this country are going to answer a call by a former leader of a terrorist organisation that has just murdered Jewish babies and children. Any support for those radicals needs to be dealt with straight away. I don't want to see this wishy-washy police behaviour that we see, unfortunately, far too often, where they stand there, they let something kick off, and then they kind of retrospectively react. We can be pretty sure what's coming because we've seen it happen. We've seen it happen in Sheffield, we've seen it happen in London, we've seen it happen across Europe, and there is every chance that, in light of the fact that the former leader of Hamas has openly called for an international day of Jihad, that we're probably going to see some kinds of demonstrations tomorrow. If those demonstrations involve support for the killing of Jews and the support for a prescribed terrorist organisation, surely our police right now need to be talking about how they're going to respond to that and get those people lifted early doors so it doesn't become a much bigger issue than it needs to be. Those will be my views, of course. I want to hear from you, gbviews@gbnews.com. But the Prime Minister has announced £3 million in extra funding to protect schools, synagogues and other Jewish community buildings. So this is news just in. The Community Security Trust has recorded a 400% increase in the prevalence of anti-Semitic incidents in the UK since Hamas's terrorist attacks in Israel a few days ago. Meanwhile, defending Israel against Hamas attacks appears to have achieved cross-party consensus. Why? Well, Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy says that Labour would support a ground offensive.
We will support a ground offensive if that is the determination of Israel at this time, to get those hostages back and to protect its borders and to degrade Hamas and their ability to harm people in Israel and indeed, it seems to me, in Gaza.
Well, significant that. It's significant. David Lammy was speaking at a pro-Palestinian event during Labour Party conference. Of course, served under Jeremy Corbyn. We all know that, don't we? And that party had an incredibly fruity, arguably dangerous track record when it came to Israel-Palestine, potentially until very recently. And statements like that are, a shift in tone, aren't they, from what we've seen in previous years. But let's cross now to Tel Aviv and get the latest with GB News reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, the night is falling where you are. What is going on? What's the situation as you see it where you are and across the country?
So the situation in general in Israel this morning, sources close to the IDF warned that this could be the quiet before the storm, that after 5 days of hectic fighting and atrocities in the south and new fronts in the north, this might be a moment where the IDF resets, secures its south and prepares for that likely ground incursion. Well, that hasn't turned out to be the case. Rocket attacks have continued in the south, hitting the small town less than a mile away from the Gaza border of Sderot. Ashkelon and Ashdod to the north of Gaza also facing rocket barrages. And in the north, security warnings have gone off in the last 2 hours. Last night, there was a major security warning in the north that later turned out to have been a reported glitch in the system here. Very concerning reports, some discussion that might have been a test by the Israelis to see how people responded, others fearing it could be hacking. In Syria, the Israeli Air Force launched direct airstrikes on the international airports in Aleppo and Damascus, likely an attempt to prevent Iranian proxies from supporting and sustaining those front lines in the south of Syria and, of course, in southern Lebanon, where they are taking in indirect fire. But now all those forces gathering on the south, reportedly for an upcoming mission. Other IDF commanders and those close to the IDF speaking this afternoon to me, saying that they're not sure if they're ready just yet. This might take another 48 hours. It's a huge operation to undertake a ground incursion into the Gaza Strip. They haven't done it since 2014. It is the most densely populated part of the world, and the Hamas terrorists there have underground bunkers and tunnels where they could spring traps and conduct all sorts of asymmetric and alternative strategies to disrupt the flow of armour into that location. It would be a highly risky, highly dangerous move if they were to undertake it. And of course, as they do that, the Israeli Armed Forces has activated hundreds of thousands of reservists, many of them from around the world. We heard this afternoon that at least 100 people from Britain have flown back to Israel, either active duty or reserve, to sign up for the IDF. That's part of a much wider global effort to sustain the country's defences as Israel faces an existential threat.
Charlie, thank you very much. Charlie Peters there, who's reporting from Tel Aviv for us. The BBC have been reported to Ofcom over the refusal to call Hamas a terrorist organisation. So 4 lawyers wrote to the regulator and accused the broadcaster of failing to show impartiality beyond doubt, urging Ofcom to investigate. Now, the BBC are defending their stance. Veteran broadcaster John Simpson saying they would be taking sides by using certain language, which is interesting because Hamas just are a prescribed terrorist organisation, so why would it be taking sides? One could argue that they'd be taking sides by not calling them a terrorist organisation. But I'm joined now by the barrister and writer, Stephen Barrett. Stephen, thank you very much. So, in terms of the law, then, do the BBC have a duty to call Hamas a terrorist organisation?
So, Hamas are a prescribed terrorist organisation under the 2000 Terrorism Act. It is not an act beyond impartiality. You're not becoming partial if you call them terrorists. They are legally terrorists. That is what they are. The BBC rules, which, Patrick, I have to warn your viewers, they are broken. The BBC is broken because its rules are broken. They are drafted like toffee. They have bits that contradict the other bits. As a system of rules, they're just appallingly drafted. And that's why this is all happening, because they don't really know what the rules are. But one of the things their rules claim is that they will uphold the rule of law. Right, well, to uphold the rule of law, you have to say Hamas are terrorists, because legally Hamas are terrorists. The other thing that the BBC claims it supports, and this is important because the BBC was, and I use my words very carefully, was a very important institution in this country upon which we could rely in times of need. And it is clearly not an institution that we can rely on now in times of need. The BBC is broken. But the other thing that it claims it will support is truth. Now, it's 2023, Patrick, and this is a bit silly, but I shouldn't have to do this. This is an apple. I have not taken sides by calling it an apple. I haven't lost my impartiality by saying it's an apple. I haven't supported some idea that apple trees should be planted everywhere or all oranges should be evaporated from the world. What we have seen in Israel, the deliberate targeting of babies and children and old people, the pictures you and I have seen, they are also terrorism. As fact, Hamas are terrorists. So as law and as fact, Hamas are terrorists. And instead of just saying that, like everybody else, the BBC has gone down a path of total madness. It has left behind objective truth, and it is trying to claim. Its post-event justifications are pathetic. The first attempt to say, "Oh, we never do this," it didn't survive a 2-second Google search. The arguments they're deploying now won't survive for seconds. It is risible, the position that the BBC has taken. And a young man, an incredibly noble young man, has had to resign, no doubt from a career he wanted his entire life. You're a broadcaster, he's 22, it's a very hard industry. And he's had to resign because he's standing up with objective truth. But we all used to stand up with objective truth. We don't stand up with objective truth and the rule of law. What are you?
Yeah.
And the BBC are...
Ofcom, for what it's worth, Stephen, and again, I will emphasise, I certainly will be the last person to call for increased Ofcom regulation into anything. So I'm not going to be that guy. The Ofcom statement, as it currently stands, is essentially this. I'll read it to you. OK, so this landed about an hour or so ago. Here it is. So the responsibility for the journalistic editorial guidelines rests with each broadcaster. It says that provided they meet Ofcom rules on due accuracy in news and due impartiality in news and current affairs. It is for broadcasters to decide the vocabulary they use to describe unfolding events. So that is Ofcom's statement on the BBC when it comes to not referring to Hamas as a terror group. Your views?
Well, that is Ofcom breaking before our eye. And I've said this before, Patrick, and it may be boring for your viewers, but the reason that all of this is happening, the reason the BBC is breaking, the reason Ofcom is breaking, is because there are too many words. Ofcom produces reams of guidance, which is just, again, toffee. The BBC's got its own guidance, which is completely contradictory and as law gibberish. And all this mess of law, this great jelly of rule, rests on top of the 2003 Communications Act, and it is incredibly badly drafted. I did think about offering my support to the Secretary of State if she wants someone to come in and redraft the Act and fix things, and it wouldn't be a policy position, Patrick, because whether you want more regulation or less regulation is up to a politician. But what you want is a working system of regulation, and law doesn't work if there are too many words.
Yeah. Look, Stephen, thank you very much. Expertly explained that from top to bottom, so really, really much appreciated. It's Stephen Barrett there, who is a barrister, writer as well. You can catch him writing very often in The Spectator, amongst other places, so do go and check that out. But coming up, we will be hearing from a Conservative member of the Scottish Parliament as Lisa Cameron MP defects from the SNP to the Tories. Quite a bizarre story to bring you, but it's happened nonetheless. I am Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Put your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, the Member of Parliament for East Kilbride, Strathaven and Lesmahagau, yeah, me neither, Lisa Cameron, has quit the Scottish National Party and defected to the Conservatives. She said that she quit because of the toxic culture in the party in Westminster Group and said that she had received support from Mr Sunak after her mental well-being deteriorated in recent weeks, but has had no contact from the SNP leadership. So the Prime Minister welcomed her to the party, calling her a brave and committed constituency MP. It is a slightly bizarre story, to say the least, because obviously the SNP, you know, want independence. The Conservative and Unionist Party do not want independence, so it's very much an about turn. Joining me now is the Scottish Conservatives Party Chairman, Craig Hoy. Craig, thank you very much. How surprised were you at this?
Good evening. I was, I think, surprised. I think many people were surprised. We didn't see this coming, but it's very good to see that Lisa Cameron now knows that what I think we've been saying about the SNP for a very long time, that it's a deeply toxic party that is riven with internal battles, that didn't accept the serious charges of bullying. And when she stood up to the SNP over the serious allegations made against Patrick Grady, when she spoke truth to power, she saw just how nasty and bitter that powerful SNP machine was. So I'm delighted that she's joining the Conservative Party and the Scottish Conservatives, and we look forward to working with her in the weeks and months ahead.
Do you think there's any chance she might remain as the constituency MP after the next election?
Well, look, we came third in that constituency last time around. I wouldn't want to predict the outcome of the next election, but we are very pleased that she has joined the Conservative Party. She spoke very warmly of the Prime Minister, his mission for the United Kingdom, the fact that he wants to take Scotland forward as part of the UK to focus on people's real priorities. And this is a huge vote of no confidence in Humza Yousaf and the bitter and divided and distracted SNP government, that rather than focusing on the Scottish national interests, are only now focused on those very, very narrow and sometimes nasty interests of the Scottish National Party.
Is it not fair to say, though, that the Tories needed the SNP a little bit? Because now it might go red, and that could well mean a Labour majority.
Well, look, the SNP are down presently, but they are not out. I'm still knocking on doors where there are SNP supporters. We'll be pointing out in seats right across Scotland where it's a straight fight between ourselves and the SNP. So that's seats in Aberdeenshire, it's in Ayrshire, it's in the south of Scotland, where I am, that it is going to be a straight choice at the next general election between the Scottish Conservatives and the SNP. And in that context, we must make sure that voters are acutely aware that the risk of independence remains, that Humza Yousaf's number one priority, in fact his only priority for Scotland, is independence. He said that the next general election manifesto, his next general election manifesto, line 1, paragraph 1, will be on independence. And he's now saying, quite bizarrely and dangerously, that if he achieves a majority of seats at Westminster, not a majority of votes, but a majority of seats, then he would take that as a signal that there's been a proxy referendum, press ahead with his independence obsession. Meanwhile, in Scotland, our schools, our hospitals, our roads, our railways, and dare I mention those ferries that are rusting on the banks of the Clyde, everything is getting worse under the SNP. Our taxes are higher, so Scotland is poor a result of the SNP, and it's good to see that Lisa Cameron has realised that and has joined us today.
Craig, thank you very much. Craig Hoy there, who is the party chairman for the Scottish Conservatives. Just reacting to that quite interesting news that an SNP MP has defected to the Tories. I've got some breaking news for you now, though. And it appears as though the French authorities have banned all pro-Palestinian demonstrations on the grounds that such protests would threaten public order. We were expecting, at some point by now, to be honest, to have gone to Paris, where we were anticipating some pro-Palestinian or potentially overtly pro-Hamas demonstrations. There is a distinction there. Again, I want to emphasise an important distinction there. But it appears, according to reports, that France has banned pro-Palestine demonstrations. We understand that some demonstrations have started to take place now anyway in Paris. It's a fast-moving picture, this, in support of Palestine against the Israeli aggression. What the French authorities appear to have said is that it would threaten public order, OK? So, again, one of the reasons why I was so focused on what was potentially going to take place in Paris over the course this evening is because of the message that this may well send to other European authorities in the coming day, especially given that the former leader of Hamas has called now openly for an international day of jihad amongst the Muslim community. So the French authorities appear to have said that it is banned, so the protests will be banned. Of course, if these protests do take place anyway over the course of the evening, what does that mean in terms of their ability to detain and stop the protesters? More on this as we get it. That is the latest out of Paris. Again, if we do start to get live shots from an event taking place in Paris, we will take those for you right here on this show. But coming up, after the mixed responses from the various members of the royal family over the horrific images in Israel and Gaza, I'll be asking, have the royal family been correct in wading in to one of the most political things that you could ever hope to be involved in, Israel-Palestine, the royal family? Should they have stayed out of it, in your view? But first, it's your headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
And the top stories this hour, the US Secretary of State has reassured the Israeli Prime Minister of Washington's support during a trip to the Middle East. Benjamin Netanyahu insists Hamas should be treated exactly the same as ISIS. Antony Blinken says he knows the terrorist group does not represent the Palestinian people or their legitimate aspirations. Here at home, Bernie Ecclestone has been handed a 17-month suspended sentence after pleading guilty to fraud. The ex-Formula One boss will also have to pay £652 million to HMRC after failing to declare more than £400 million in an overseas trust. And an update to the story brought you a short time ago. It has been confirmed a Kenya Airways flight was diverted to Stansted Airport from Nairobi over security concerns, and we know the plane landed safely. It had been due to land at London Heathrow Airport. Those are the top stories. You can get more by heading to our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Let's check on the health of the markets then. The pound today buying you $1.2221 and 1.1575 euros. The price of gold is £1,532.47 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed the day at 7,644 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
Well, the King, the Prince and Princess of Wales they've issued some statements, haven't they? Yes, condemning the horrific terrorism committed in Israel last weekend. So a variety of different messages, which even confused me there for a second. King Charles has even held talks with the chief rabbi at Buckingham Palace this afternoon. But the responses, especially that of Harry and Meghan, have drawn criticism. Many are asking, were the royals right to wade in? Normally, when we talk about whether they've been too political or otherwise, we're talking about things like the environment. That's been one of the big ones recently, hasn't it? Whether or not the royals are getting too involved in the environment. You know, Prince Charles, or King Charles now, has been very, very vocal over the course of the last few decades, hasn't he, about various environmental causes. Prince William rocks up at things like COP26. Of course, we've seen Harry, who's now not really a working royal, so I suppose getting overtly political matters less there. But Israel-Palestine is the most political thing anyone could ever really think of getting involved in. It's even, I mean, it's way more political than Brexit, which was arguably the other most political thing that you could ever see them getting involved in. And now, one after the other, they have got involved, even calling Hamas a terrorist group before the BBC. So there you go. So our royals are perfectly capable of doing that. But do you think that they were right to get involved? Have they overstepped the mark? gbviews@gbnews.com. That's what I want to hear from you. Do you think that the royals were right to wade in to the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm going to go into the inbox now immediately. Keith has been on. Keith says, yes, the king is right to make comments. As the leader of the church in this country, what Hamas has done is attack Christianity, he says. And Hamas is a movement of hate. Here we go. Royals cause a rumble. Yes, so the royal family is in favour of Jewish people, question mark, says Wayne. There you go. So I suppose that's quite a strong statement. Patrick, if the royals don't speak out, they will end up being the kings and queens of everyone and no one. This is from Becky, who says that she's super proud that they've spoken out. She says, I hope you are too. I think that you are. There you go, Becky. Right, Michael Cole joins me now, royal commentator and historian extraordinaire. Michael, thank you very much. Have the royals overstepped the mark? Have they done the right thing? Have they misjudged it a little bit? Or are they absolutely right to come out swinging for Israel?
Patrick, it's absolutely right and proper that the king should have spoken as he's spoken. And I think most right-minded people in this country would not only have expected it, they'd have welcomed it. Israel is a democratic and friendly country. Hamas is a proscribed organization. That means it's a terrorist organization, although the BBC doesn't seem to think so. And it is financed by Iran, who could not be more inimical to this country. They regard us as the enemy, as the running dog of the great Satan of America. So they don't really like us. The king has reacted, though, on humanitarian grounds as much as political grounds. Of course, there's always a political overtone. And it's right and proper because, for the very least of it, 17 British people are missing as a result of this invasion of southern Israel. One of them, at least, is dead. Hamas has turned southern Israel into a slaughterhouse. Families have been destroyed. Children are being murdered in their beds. This is an appalling situation. And the king is quite rightly moved by it, as have been the Prince and Princess of Wales. And it's right and proper they should speak out. Now as much as any time ever, because we stand with humanity. It's not a question of standing with this side or that side. And the king has made a point of speaking to both President Herzog of Israel and King Abdullah of Jordan, who's on the obviously on the border of Israel. So I think the king has acted properly and he's spoken for us all. And I further think that most right-minded Arab people in this country and elsewhere will have condemned those massacres, and also Muslim people around the world, because it's wrong, it's disgraceful. It has been the catalyst of a terrible events. And, of course, we don't know where they're going.
Yeah, look, I was worried, actually, when I saw them taking the sides. Again, the reaction in my inbox here, right in front of me now, is overwhelmingly positive that the King and Queen and the future King and Queen have come out and said what they've said, which is to condemn, obviously, all the atrocities taking place there. However, I was worried that it may well lead to an increased Islamist threat against the royal family as a result of it, because there are a lot of nefarious actors out there.
Yeah, well, of course, the king, throughout his life as an adult, has done his very best to promote interfaith dialogue and reconciliation. And as we've all seen him, he's never been short to put on a funny hat to go into this temple or that temple, or to take off his shoes and to communicate as best he can with those people. He said when he was at Cambridge, he was glad he studied anthropology because it helped him to understand all the various customs of people around the world. And I'm quite sure that's true. His sincerity cannot be in doubt about that. And I think he acted and spoke for us all. And if he'd said nothing, well, what would the reaction have been? Don't we care? Well, of course we care. And I think that has been shown by President Biden, by our own Prime Minister, by every right-thinking person. And they've demonstrated, and quite rightly so, their concern about the situation. I was out there 50 years ago, Patrick. I am that old. I covered the Yom Kippur War, which was the last time that Israel was taken completely by surprise and attacked. Never has there been since then an occasion like this. And I also reported from both the Egyptian and the Syrian side. So I do think I know a little bit about it. And I think that people, even Israeli Arabs, and there are Israeli Arabs who vote in the Israeli elections, will have condemned this. And most Palestinians will know that this is only going to bring more death and suffering to them, because those people living in Gaza, they've got nowhere else to run. And I've been in Gaza. I've filmed in the hospitals. I've filmed in the seat of government there, such as it is. I've filmed in the beachfront cafes when life was going on as normally as possible. Those are the people who suffer. And who's paying for it all? The Ayatollahs in Tehran. Every rocket that they've paid for that's coming out from Hamas onto the settlements of southern Israel. They're the people behind this, and they're carrying on a proxy war with the West, and they're using the Palestinians for that purpose.
Michael, thank you very, very much. Expertly summarised that, as ever. Michael Cole, their royal correspondent and writer. I'm just going to read a couple of the emails on this, because I did do a proper shout-out on this, so thank you very much. Cynthia says, the royals, absolutely right. King Charles, the royal family have spoken out. It's not political, says Cynthia. I kind of get what you mean, but I mean, it overtly is when it's Israel-Palestine. But the late Queen would have sent her condolences as well. I suspect so, yes. Colin says, yes, the King is right, not sitting on the fence. Well done, sir, says Colin. Margaret says, yes, the King and Prince William are right to make statements. We have a constitutional monarchy. I'm just going to look here now and see if I can find a couple of words. They disagree with them. No, Richard says, there we go. No, they should not get involved. They can't implement any action or influence any change. Stay out of politics, says Richard. All right, OK, so it's not all one-way traffic in the inbox. But GBviews at gbnews.com. Keep those views coming in. Coming up, I'll be ending the show on a lighter note. I'll be discussing the winner of this year's Woman of the Year award. In case you're wondering, it's a man. Of course it is. I mean, that's just the way that we roll these days, isn't it? A man wins the Woman of the Year award. Hey, there's still hope for me in that case, I think. All of that in just a sec. Patrick Christys, GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to ordinary people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio. Right, welcome back. It is 5:45. You're watching or listening to me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And loads of you have been getting in touch about whether or not the King was right to pipe up about Israel-Palestine, essentially pick a side. I am also, very shortly, going to be talking about the fact that, yes, a man has won the Woman of the Year award. Does anything shock you anymore? Really? Does anything shock you anymore? I'm not sure it does. But here now, though, somebody who definitely isn't easily shocked. It's Beth Turner, who's filling in for Michelle Dewberry. You all right?
I'm very good. I'm very interested in that story, though.
Next year, I'm going to be applying for Woman of the Year.
No, Patrick, you're all man.
Thank you.
Trust me, listeners, he's all man. You smell like a man.
Wow, that's OK. That's got weird quick. What's on your show?
OK, so we're going to be bringing the latest from Israel. Now, we've got a brilliant strategic intelligence analyst and regional expert specialising in Arab and Muslim affairs.
Gosh.
At the start of the show.
That's a job title.
It is a job title. I'll work out to make that sound a little more snappy before we go on air. But he is a proper expert on this stuff, Patrick. And I don't know about you, but I think we do need a bit of a breather, an idiot's guide. What exactly is going on? Why have we got to this situation? And what might happen next? What might it mean for us? I'm so looking forward to talking to him. And there's this really interesting educational report about the fact that white pupils have slipped behind since the pandemic in the classrooms. I don't know whether you've seen this. You might have even been covering it this afternoon, particularly in relation to Chinese and Indian kids who are flying ahead by the time they finish school. They're way in front. Why?
I think it's great. It's fascinating. Well, yeah, we can go. You'll go into that on your show, won't you? But I am fascinated by this kind of stuff, to get the reasons behind it. You know, are there issues, though, in the home as well? Is it different cultures that lead people to go on and maybe are they more disciplined? Are they more accepting of authority? You know?
And aspirational. It's about the children of immigrants who have still got parents who know what it is to have nothing and are therefore pushing the kids harder, more tutors, more homework. And actually, some of the white British families are sitting back complacently and watching those others who have moved here go further ahead of them.
The idea that maybe as part of society we haven't known that much hardship recently, and therefore we're just content to kind of go all squishy with it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And so Dawn Neeson is with me, and James Schneider, who's the most handsome man on GB News.
Oh, that hurt. OK, thank you very much. Beth Turner will be up next, covering for Michelle Dewberry. Now, let's end the show on a lighter note. Well, it's not that light if you're a woman, I suppose. We have a new winner for this year's Woman of the Year, and I say woman, but in reality it is a biological man. So when TikTok sensation Dylan Mulvaney, who came out as transgender... I mean, did they have to come out as transgender during the COVID pandemic, has won an award hosted by Attitude magazine this year. But is this right for a biological man to win such an award? Stephanie Davies-Arai is the director of Transgender Trend and joins me now. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So I suppose I still could win Woman of the Year, which has long been a dream for me. So what do you make of Dylan Mulvaney being Woman of the Year?
Well, let me tell you how to do it. You have to identify as a woman.
Right.
That's it.
Well, that's it. Yes. Yeah. Well, lucky for you, I'm way ahead of you. But no. So I mean, is it offensive? Genuinely, is it offensive?
Yeah, of course it is. But we're used to it now. I mean, this has been going on for years. You can't get a sort of Woman of the Year list without one or two men in it these days. Anyway, I remember when was it? Back in 2015, I think Woman's Hour had Caitlyn Jenner as a Woman of the Year. You know, we are used to it, and yes, it is offensive. It's as if there aren't enough good women around to fulfil these slots, and every place that's taken by a man, a woman loses a place. It's exactly the same as in sports. But Dylan Mulvaney is somebody who, I mean, I've got nothing against Dylan Mulvaney. Good luck to him in how he presents himself, what he does, what he wants to look like. But he's not a woman. And I thought when he started doing My First Day as a Woman, My Second Day as a Woman,
I thought it was a joke.
On, you know, and I was thinking, oh, that's how you become a woman. Maybe I should start trying. But it was almost as if he was sort of taking a rise out of the transgender thing, saying it was almost sending it up himself. And I think a few of us watched him and thinking this is quite clever, actually. But then he was picked up and has risen to great stardom through doing that. And for me, I work with, my concern is children and young girls now growing up in this culture where a man is apparently the best woman, and how that affects girls growing up now, when there's nothing they can do to beat that, can they?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes it also does maybe suspend complete and utter logic. So there's probably a slight difference. I mean, I think all of it's wrong, by the way, but there's probably a slight difference between if it being based on some kind of performative achievement, right? So if I identified as a woman and then won the 100 metres race, I suppose then technically, if you're going to accept men as women, then, you know, I've won that race. I think there are times when men enter things like beauty competitions and are demonstrably not the most beautiful person there, to say the least, and they still win. And it makes me wonder, what's the point of it all? Is it just, are we all just living in a clown world that is designed for people to pat each other on the back to show who the most progressive person is? And I think you hit the nail on the head there. He said, that must do damage to girls.
And it's a good point, because Dylan Mulvaney is known for being an influencer. And again, fair enough, that's what he does. Good luck to him. But as far as aspirations go, there are, I can think of a lot of women who've achieved much more, let's say, important things than that in their lives. And over the last year, I'd probably give my vote to Kate Harris of the LGB Alliance, or Bev Jackson, for setting up an organisation against all the odds to protect the rights of same-sex attracted people, which I would thought Attitude Mag would be really, wanting to elevate lesbians who are doing that kind of work for same-sex attracted women. That would seem to fit their remit, but no, it's much more.
It's all about the trans, isn't it? It's all about it's all about the T.
It ticks the box, doesn't it, of so-called diversity, whereas actually Dylan Mulvaney is presenting a very regressive stereotype of a woman who's sort of prancing about, putting on lipstick, wearing little skirts and looking like an empty airhead. And that's not really, and again, I'm not criticising him for how he wants to express himself. It's a free world. But that is a really regressive stereotype of a woman, and that's what's being celebrated.
Again, I mean, the whole thing, to be honest with you, just seems a little bit of a mess, really, about, what we are now judging to be, great qualities of womanhood, while simultaneously trying to smash down every single barrier to society. I just find it bonkers. I'm afraid we are out of time, because I could quite clearly talk to you about this all day. But Stephanie, congratulations on everything that you do, and I do hope to talk to you again very soon. Stephanie Davies-Arai there, who is the director of Transgender Trend. What do you make of that? I mean, Dylan Mulvaney, good grief, being named as Woman of the Year. Bev Turner will be up with you next for a rip-roaring hour. I will be back, and I've got an absolute corker for you, by the way, 9 till 11 this evening, with a whole host of absolutely top guests, loads of great debates and loads of great chats, so make sure that you tune into that. But first, of course, it is indeed Bev Turner, who will be standing in for Michelle Dewberry. Thank you very much, everybody who's been emailing in, who's been getting in touch. Like I said, I will see you at 9 p.m. tonight. Take it easy.
Hello, I'm Alex Berkell. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, when we have some pretty wet and windy weather waiting to push its way into southern parts as we go through the next 12 hours or so. That's in association with an area of low pressure just to the southwest of the UK that's currently tracking towards us. What it means is as we go through the end of Thursday, yes, it's a cloudy picture, but it's going to turn increasingly wet and windy as we go through tonight and into the early hours of Friday morning. Slightly drier further north across northern parts of England, Northern Ireland and into Scotland, but even here we are expecting some blustery, showery weather to push its way southwards. Could turn a little chilly for some sheltered spots of Scotland. Otherwise, under the cloud and rain, it's going to be fairly mild. So Friday then, a wet picture.